Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we are very kindly joined by Chris Wilson to talk everything Legion. And to get straight into it, Chris, how are you doing, and could you give us the Legion sales pitch?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks very much for having me. Legion sales pitch. So this is a league. I guess people have asked for a risk versus reward league for a while, right? Like they want Breach again, and they want lots of monsters to kill and lots of items to come out, and no complex UI where you chain stuff together. They just want to fight some things and get some rewards, and that's what we're doing this time. So yeah, you'll probably like Legion, especially if you play melee characters. Somewhat a different experience to before.
And how would you say it stands out from a lot of the comparisons, since people do just say Breach 2.0 quite a lot?
It's certainly inspired by Breach, but we kind of think of it as mechanically it plays differently when you're actually deciding what monsters to do damage to during the monolith stage, right? There's a lot of complex decisions there. At least until you get your insane in-game builds going, you're not going to be able to tag most of the monsters because they take a fair amount of damage to free them. And so because of that, there's quite a lot more smarts that goes on during the selection process than people may realize. There's rewards. We think of it a little bit like a shopping spree thing where you see all these reward icons and you want to go and get the ones that are most exciting. And as you run towards one, you'll see a chest off to the side, and there's various mechanics, like I believe tagging a chest actually activates monsters near it, which adds a lot more risk for the reward you're getting. And so it requires a little bit more thinking than something like Breach, but gives you more fine control over it.
So on that, do you kind of think there'll be a lot of people on their first character will be like, tag everything, then it's going to go, hang on, whoops, let's control this a bit more going forward? Or
they're very unlikely to be tagging everything on their first character. I mean, that's something when you've got your like super in-game build going, it lets you clear screens quickly. It's quite hard to free the monsters, especially all of them.
A quick question on that. Is that also when you're leveling? Like, so there's the difference from leveling up and end game. So do you never get the feeling that you can like tag everything in a good early game setup?
We should avoid using the word tag because it isn't just a matter of clicking them. You've got to kill them, right? Like you've got to fight them and do a bunch of damage. So, I mean, if you are capable of clearing that many monsters that quickly on a leveling build, then that's awesome, and I want to know what build it is. And it's not intentional, right? Like, we fail if people are easily doing that. And at the moment, part of the balance we're doing is trying this, and we are finding builds that can occasionally do it. We make tweaks. We don't want it so that it's easy to do so. Now, of course, it's one of those things where the community will probably surprise us and come up with a cool build that can do, and that's part of the fun of this. But it's certainly not easy to free all of the monsters.
And then on that note, how do you have it so that both slower builds and faster builds, they can both engage with it meaningfully?
So in the context of Path of Exile, a slow build is a weaker build, right? I hate the term speed clear meta and all that kind of stuff, but if you're playing at half the speed of another player, you're getting half as many rewards, you're making half as much progress during the league, and you're basically rewarded less, right? So the game is entirely rigged so that a fast character is being classified as a better character. And so leagues like this aren't abnormal compared to regular gameplay. If I'm playing at a certain speed and getting only 4 maps done per hour, then I make a character 50% more effective to do 6 maps an hour. Then I have earned more rewards, I've made a better character, I'm winning the game more. And the same is true for something like Legion. If you play a more effective character that can free more monsters and get more rewards, you are winning more than someone who doesn't. So we think of a slower build as a weaker build, because that's honestly what it is, right? It's a build that isn't capable of killing at the higher efficiency rate that the good builds can do. And that's just the reality, where these games linearly reward you for how effectively you can clear areas, right? If you make yourself twice as fast, you're getting twice as much stuff, you're going to get a lot more cool things in that league. And so I understand it sucks if you're a person who enjoys playing slow, interesting niche builds, but that's a choice you're doing to have more fun, as opposed to like becoming more efficient to make a better character.
I think that's fair. So to just backtrack a little bit then, so what aspects of Legion itself would you say you're most excited for from both the player and like the developer point of view?
There's quite a lot of cool stuff here. As a developer, I am very excited about the Legion jewels, right? Because the thing that makes me most happy to work on Path of Exile is looking at what cool stuff the community does in terms of builds, right? Like the builds being different every league, crazy things coming out of the community in terms of the cool characters they're making, helping select these for the build of the week videos, all that kind of stuff, right? I want to see people coming up with crazy things. And these jewels are kind of the pinnacle of crazy as far as we're concerned. There's a lot of cool stuff they do. We've only shown like a little bit of the surface of it. And so from a developer's point of view, we're going to be like milking those jewels for a number of years in terms of seeing cool stuff coming out, right? So there's a lot of fun to be had there. So from a player's point of view, I kind of really like the idea, from my playtesting so far, of finding cool Legion layouts where you get a bunch of rewards clustered together that you can easily tag all of them, and you feel that you haven't added as much risk as the rewards that you've gotten, right? Like you have a fight that you can manage and get a lot of cool stuff, and that feels really good. It's that overlapping axes of randomness thing from Breach that people saw in my GDC talk, for example. There's that strong feeling with Legion, where if you're lucky, you just get a really good cluster of monsters where there's a ton of rewards together and, sergeants and other very powerful monsters that drop well. And that feels really good. And of course, occasionally you get bad layouts where you can barely tag stuff. There's a monster stuck on the other side of a wall and that kind of thing. But it feels really good when you have it work well, and I enjoy that.
So, talking about the jewels a bit, since there's, loads of confusion and no one really knows how they work, without spoiling everything, could you kind of give us a bit of an idea of how they sort of, work, basically?
So there's 5 legions, right? 5 different types of army. Let's see if I can remember them. There's the Val, there's the Maraketh, there's the Eternal Empire, there's the Karui. Oh, I always forget the 5th one. Anyway, there's 5. And the Templar, right, that's right, yeah. And each one has a single jewel that you can get. And these jewels differ by what seed they have. And I believe the seed is represented on the jewel as a number in the stat description. So if you understand computer science and so on with random number generation, the way that seeds work is that they basically give you a different outcome each time you run the same formula, but it's deterministic. If you plug the same seed in the same situation, you get the same result. And this is how the jewel can modify your passive tree randomly, but in a consistent way. So if I take the jewel and I put it in a certain socket, something happens. And then if I give the jewel to Jonathan and he puts on his character in the same socket, the same thing happens. So that jewel does that thing, but his jewel that he found does something different. In terms of how you get these, that end-game rewards from the different legions, right? You want to fight the legions in the hardest content you can, and you hopefully get the rewards. There's a lot of interesting debate about their rarity, right? Because this is something we want to be a high-end reward, but we don't want it to be so rare that no one gets to play with it. So we're trying to pitch it in a good place where, someone who's on Reddit and engaging with the community, like a top 10% player, can absolutely get these and can absolutely do character builds with them. The intention is if they get through the league and don't have any, then we failed in giving them rewards. But we also don't want them to see hundreds, right? If you get the ability to get a whole stash tab full of these jewels that you get to just put in and out of each socket, that's not necessarily a very fun experience. And so we're being very careful with the way that you get them. And in general, I would recommend just playing harder Legion content as our clue as to how to get the jewels more efficiently.
As far as I'm aware, it's been said that we could divine them to change the seed. Is that correct?
It sounds like it would be, but I don't know that for a fact.
Okay, and then assuming that we could, and just to give an idea of just how many possibilities there are, let's say Raiz had seed number 5,000. If I had the same base jewel, how realistic would it be for me to throw 100 divines and hit it?
My understanding is there's thousands of seeds per jewel, so
okay,
it's hard to hit the same one.
That's pretty cool.
Having said that, as soon as it's searchable on the trade sites, of course, you can try to find one that's the same as the one that you want.
That's quite scary. So talking a little bit about the legions themselves then, how do you differentiate between the legions when playing? Do they feel vastly different, or are they just reskinned?
Well, once you've got that character you were talking about earlier that can kill everything without thinking, then they feel the same because they're just bags of damage that doesn't, there's no gameplay at that stage. But when you're actually playing the game properly, the different legions have different monsters in them. They have different generals. The monsters use different skills. It feels different because there's kind of different flavors of how they're going to attack you, right? The Templar guys are going to be Templar, people running around with swords and so on, whereas the Val are potentially doing more interesting stuff. And so they do intentionally feel different because of the monster variety. But there's also a rarity skew, right? As far as I'm aware, the Maraketh are one of the rarer ones. So because of this, if you have one of the rare ones showing up in one of your monolith encounters while you're mapping, you totally want to get as many of those monsters freed as possible to increase the chances of the really valuable splinters as opposed to the comparatively less valuable splinters.
Would that mean then that there might be some more powerful jewels or more powerful loot in general locked behind the Maraketh as opposed to the Templar, or are they just more valuable by their scarcity and other people maybe wanting their things?
There are 2 aspects to it. The first one is, of course, they have a different general and different rewards. I've managed to keep myself innocent of knowing what the actual rewards are, so I can't answer that question, but I expect that there's better rewards along the better ones. But the other aspect to it is this. The best rewards come from the 5 army endgame map, right? You can sit there doing 2 emblem maps repeatedly, and that's cool and everything, and you get some fun stuff. But 3 is better, 4 is much better, and 5 is amazing, right? You want to be doing 5. And 5 requires the rarest one, right? You can spam like 2 common ones repeatedly if you want to, as a cheap way of fighting the in-game content, and many players like myself will do that as the hardest we can handle. But the actual good players, like you guys, are going to want to be doing the 5 army version because the rates of the rewards there get a lot higher, and that's bottlenecked by the hard-to-get splinters.
Is that
Okay.
a case of just you have more access to the rewards, or they're also exclusive rewards with like 5?
My understanding is that the drop rates for stuff get higher. I mean, at the very least, 5 armies equals 5 generals, which means 5 shots of good uniques and so on. But
More time
I mean,
efficient.
I don't want to talk too much about how the jewels spawn, but I can certainly confirm it's better to be playing more armies at once.
Okay.
I have one question about the duel. So, have you intended them to be more like Watcher's Eyes, where they're always just random, or would there be a lower access one? I guess there's the Uber Elder and the normal one, which is the 2 and the 3 stat. Do you have something similar for this, where you have a higher quality duel and a lower quality duel for the for the more casuals to obtain?
So the jewels, there are 5 jewels, right? They each do a specific thing that are entirely different to each other that affect the passive tree. For example, you've seen the Val one. I think we went into a lot of detail that the Val one draws a radius around it and then corrupts all the passives within the radius by picking from random Val passives. There's Val keystones, there's Val notables, there's small Val passives, and it's seeded. And you get the idea. If you don't like it, stick a different jewel in there, put it in a different socket. That's the one we've talked about in a lot of detail. The other 4 do different things to the passive tree. You'll work it out from the different teasers that Bex is posting, what kind of stuff they do. Now, the only thing that differentiates the jewel that you find from the jewel someone else finds is a seed on it. But because the fact that Val might be a relatively common, I forget how common Val is compared to the others, but let's say it was common, there's going to be a lot more of those going around. The casual players are going to get to experiment with the Val stuff, whereas maybe the Marrakech jewel's doing some nuts things that are really complicated or really difficult to take advantage of, and that's quite a lot rarer.
So getting back to actually fighting the Legion, so you said earlier that like a good build deserves to be rewarded by tagging more enemies, killing more enemies, but is there any kind of protection for like small or contained maps on how the enemies will actually spawn in?
So you're talking about the problems that would happen with enemies spawning in on indoors areas where
Yeah,
there's
like a
quite a lot
sewer
of
map,
terrain?
for example. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I actually made some notes on this when I talked to the team about it. Let me just bring those up. Right. So the point that they raised here is if you're in a map where there are fewer areas for the monsters to spawn, then you're probably getting less XP per hour. The drawback of playing the indoors area is you're getting just less pure monsters to fight here. But the advantage is it concentrates the rewards much more densely together, to the point where many of our PoE team are preferring the indoors encounters because it stacks up a pile of monsters very close together and there's less traveling around. And so you kind of have a compromise here where the reward per time is slightly higher in the indoors ones, but the experience per time is higher in the outdoors ones, where stuff is spread around, but it's entirely possible for you to just tag a bunch of trash, basically. And the reason why this is the case is because the spawning equation we use for how to choose the things, like places down the generals and places down rewards and places down chests and so on, in a specific way that happens to cause clustering when there's a lot of size constraints. So anyway, the guys strongly believe this is the case, and that's good, because it would suck if the indoors ones were just worse.
I guess one of the other advantages of that is, for example, if you're like the Tornado Shot chain build, you could do open maps, but if you're a Cleave build, you could do the indoor maps, and you can still engage the mechanic either way, sort of thing.
Yes, I do like the idea of tailoring your gameplay to what build you've chosen to play.
Okay. And then another big question on that is, we've seen in the trailers that the armies fight each other. Do they do like meaningful damage? If I was slow, for example, would they like steal all my kills, or?
So that's a good question. So they thematically fight each other, right? If you're not there on the screen, the monsters will hit each other. And if you are, then they'll fight you instead because you're the interloper. The problem is this actually wrecks client and server performance. And so the team wanted me to make a specific point that we're toning that down or removing the fighting of monsters because performance is key to us here. Well, it's cool that they do, right? Like, it's an awesome thing to see. But if that's going to cause performance problems, that's going fast. So we're hoping we can achieve some degree of thematic fighting, but as soon as it's causing issues for players, then it's not going to happen.
Okay.
It's interesting because we have the enemy to enemy combat already in a few zones in the story, but I guess it's just that it's like rather limited and there's not that much going on. Like it's maybe a single screen in the harbor bridge or something where you see them fighting each other.
There's a lot of monsters here in Legion. There's a lot. It's causing some problems, right? Like there's a lot of work going into making that possible.
You may not have the answer to this, but I'm curious. Well, first off, this is an easy one. You probably have the answer to. Since you said you have to kill your way through the I don't know what to call it, like the shell or something that's holding them in place. You don't just tag it; you actually have to damage the thing down. Does that mean that that would then count as like a monster effectively and be affected by map mods? So like if you're in a res map or a phys reduction map or more monster life map, it's more difficult to free them.
You know, I'm not exactly sure. I would expect that the more monster life stuff does contribute, but I'd have to confirm that. It's worth noting that this stuff here doesn't trigger on kill effects. Or, well, it triggers on kill effects, but not corpse effects, for example. Like if you're using, say, Infernal Blow, it's technically not a corpse that can explode when you free them. It's just that the monster is defeated as such. And so, as I think I mentioned in an FAQ, we're trying very hard to get as many on-kill things to work correctly, but there are some things that implicitly won't work here.
I think the main one which will make or break it will be Essence Drain Contagion will either be the best or the worst build if it works.
Yeah, I forget what the answer was on that one. I think it was a yes, but don't hold me to it.
Okay.
And the one other small thing, though, if you didn't have the answer to more monster life, you may not have this. I was just wondering if pack size modifiers will actually affect legions or not.
I'm not sure. I can check with the team. I mean, these are good questions that we can clarify pretty easily and then get you the answer on. Yeah. Jonathan says there's no way it does, so that's good to know.
Okay.
Okay.
He actually like controls how the stuff works, so
he's more than welcome to come and take over at any point if he needs to.
Nice. Well, he's here as a resource.
So one question I have just in general, so it seems like a very big focus of Legion is letting players pick their own battle. What led you guys to wanting to design that much control into the League mechanic?
Players have asked for agency, right? Players have asked for risk and reward, and we're just trying it out, see how it feels. You know, if it's good, we'll do it more in the future. If it isn't, we won't. And it's nice in a way because a lot of the time you have a Path of Exile encounter that we've designed for you, and it's going to be too easy or it's going to be too hard, and they're not great experiences. So in this case, there's the ability to kind of control it, and this means there are lots of ways of going wrong, right? Like when I was first playing Legion, I was really cautious and didn't tag enough stuff, and then at the end of it, I think I totally should have killed more monsters and got more rewards, and so the next time I overcompensate to get an encounter that's way too difficult, and it's kind of fun working out how strong your character is. There's got a bit of a delve thing there in terms of being able to actually quantify the strength of your character at different points during your progress.
Do you think that very often players will be in a position where they'll have the capability to break a lot of monsters free, but not necessarily the capability to handle those monsters? Like, are you designing in such a way to try and get people to overextend?
Ideally, yes. How that ends up, of course, depends on the next week of iteration, right? We've got it working, it's fun. We're doing a lot of QA to make sure that this is good, and we will continue to do so during the league. I mean, I'm hoping it's the case that we manage to achieve that goal.
Okay. Because having that happen at least like once or twice.
I don't know if it's my internet or Discord has died, but everyone is lagging. So, F. I might just try swapping the server real quick and see if that fixes things. Okay, I swapped the Discord server. I think we're back now. Yeah,
we're back.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Discord.
Nice.
You were saying, Octavian, that you think it's good that players overextend themselves just a few times on experience.
Yeah, I was just kind of elaborating on that. That it seems it'll also lead to a lot of fun rip clips.
Yeah, I agree. That would be awesome. We'll try to get there. And we change leagues as they're in progress, right? If we don't feel we've achieved it, we have the tools to make it happen.
But is the damage sort of coming in a more expected manner? Like a lot of problems with Syndicate was that frequently people felt like the damage was seemingly coming out of nowhere. There was a sort of buildup, but it was just very difficult to keep track of. Is this like, does the difficulty come from the sheer quantity that the player chooses to engage with?
Well, a few things to note are that we've been trying a lot better with damage signaling now that we have the tools for players to get out of the way, right? Like with the new melee stuff, we're trying very hard to make sure that there is damage signaling. The other thing to be aware of is that Melee's a bit of a mess in terms of, the Legion stuff's a bit of a mess in terms of the monsters on the screen. There are a lot, right? Like there's monsters everywhere. This is a clutter league. I want to stress, there's a lot of monsters. And so you really have to kind of manage the crowd control well. Think of it like the cow level. There's a bunch of stuff happening. You want to make sure that you're not caught off guard.
Is it more, so the monster design itself, is it, since you're talking about the abilities that they have and how they can signal, are they designed more to be will you encounter stuff like betrayal style monsters, or are they more like the classic PoE style? I will be able to freeze them, for instance, like all of them.
I think so.
Okay.
Just to backtrack a little bit, you kind of touched on this with some legions being rarer than others. Are any of the legions going to be map only, or are they accessible from level 1?
They certainly kick in at higher levels, but I'm not sure if that means map only.
Okay.
So yeah, level 1 has a limited amount, and it gets higher as you play through the game, but I'm not sure what the level cutoffs are.
Okay.
Good
And then
question.
just to extend from that, is there anything that will promote people doing higher level content so we don't see a repeat of like quarry farming or something?
Yeah, it's certainly better to play higher level content. We have a few mechanisms we're using to achieve this. We do have gating behind a few of the types of rewards, of course. You do want to get higher eye level stuff. Like especially with incubators, there's a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of making sure that you don't just get early game incubators and get great results from them for high level characters. We're making sure this is handled properly. There's also a bit of effort that's going into making sure that the level of the content you're getting in the Domain of Timeless Conflict is appropriate for the amount of effort you put in to get access to it. So we expect there will be a degree of quarry farming like stuff if players feel that's the most efficient way of achieving a certain goal, right? Like we like the idea of a player getting repeatable, easy access to it if they want to. We just want to make sure it's not the dominant strategy. We want to make sure that a third of the players are choosing to do that, but the other 2/3 are playing properly. And it depends on whether you like zone out and do something repeatable thing or actually play properly and get better results from it.
It depends how big the Reddit thread gets, huh? Whether it's
Yeah.
effective or not. Okay.
Just out of interest on a purely personal, not like company level, what's your opinion on the whole low-level farming thing we've seen over the last few leagues?
Some of my best experiences in action RPGs have involved doing something mindlessly. Like I think I was quoted once as saying Path of Exile was a kind of game you just want to like play while watching TV or something, and people made fun of me for years for saying that. But I mean, like, Mephisto farming or something in D2, where you just work out what you're doing and then just do that, and it's fun, and you kind of just repeat it. You've got it down, and it's something you don't need to think about. You can just be doing it while having a conversation with someone and not in any danger. That's a fun thing with action RPGs. I mean, of course, it's good to play properly as well, and I'll certainly pay attention 80% of the time. But it's really fun to have something that you know how to do that's going to give you some results, and just spam that and get good rewards from it. So within moderation, I do enjoy kind of mindless game playing as well.
So I think I agree with you on that. It's just the case of when the minus gameplay feels more rewarding than everything else, that's when there's the problem.
Oh yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah. Okay.
So confirmed, Chris played Sorceress primarily in D2?
So
It's more like a whirlwind bard to me.
On the level of going back to the bosses briefly, so we know that we can increase the difficulty by putting more in at once. Is there any like Uber versions, or is it just put in 5 at once?
There is no explicit Uber version at this stage. It's just a matter of putting in higher emblems, but it's a lot harder to get the rarer emblems, and of course the difficulty goes up a lot. It also increases the effective eye level of the area you're playing in, right? So there's bigger bonuses for the 5 army version. You get better rewards from it. You want to be playing the 5 army endgame maps if you know what you're doing, but then it's using 5 emblems at once and takes longer to farm up to it. So, it'll be an interesting compromise. And of course, it's real difficult to fight 5 armies simultaneously. I mean, there's 5 generals there. It's going to be a bit of a mess.
And like, how large are these zones that you're going to with 5 armies? Like, if we throw in 5 emblems, can we expect to have 5 generals, as you say, on top of us immediately when we port in, or will we be like running around the zone taking them on 1 or 2 at a time? If you,
I think that it's probably a good idea to experience it to find out.
Okay.
I think it's fun if you play it when it's live. It's only a week,
I can have some patience.
Yeah.
A slightly less spoilery question then. Are the zones static, or do they have like random mods attached as well?
We're not using random mods on the areas. So Domain of Timeless Conflict is the same, in terms of the amount of mods affecting it. Of course, the more emblems you put in, the better it is, right? That's going to make it certainly a lot more valuable. As to why, it's just a choice we made. We experimented with having random mods in Delve and Synthesis, and we decided not to here. We'll see what happens. We can always do it again next league, have random mods on the areas. We we feel in this case it's kind of unnecessary to do so. It's not like you're playing the Domain of Timeless Conflict repeatedly. Like, it's not a thing where you progress to it away from maps. It's a reward for getting a bunch of splinters, which involves normal mapping and playing regular content.
Okay, that's fair.
Were you happy with the outcome of how the testing went with Delve and the synthesis bossing?
We added the random mods because we felt it was necessary during them. I mean, with Delve, I thought that worked quite well. With Synthesis, of course, we all have small regrets about that league, many things we weren't able to fix in time before release. But, you know, I'm not unhappy with the decision to add the random mods there.
Not to attack the decision, as I actually kind of agree with you that in Delve, I think it fits it pretty well. But I'm just curious as to what you see as the advantages of the random mod system. Is it to add sort of a level of variety, you know, in Uber version in a place where you can't really do that usually?
The reason why you want random mods on areas is so that it feels different the second time. By not having them on the Domain of Timeless Conflict, we run the risk that if there are so many of these that you're playing like 300 of them, it'll get boring. Now, we don't think that's the case because it's a complete crazy fight with 5 armies and it's going to be awesome, and you're not doing 300 of these. But it is a risk we take by having something be a little bit more static that it becomes boring. So random mods really help. It means you get the easy ones, you get the hard ones, you get the ones with cool combinations of mods, and the emergent behavior that comes from this is pretty strong. Our mod system is pretty mature by now. There's a lot of interesting stuff we can do with it.
A question that isn't on the doc. In the past, you've said you've had issues where streamers are doing a level of content that the viewers feel like bad that they can't replicate, like with the early beta, like pre-mapping systems.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there might be a case where someone's watching someone like Noogie or Ziz doing the 5 armies all the time, and then you're getting players in a case of frustration also doing 5 armies, but then like failing epically?
So I love the idea of aspirational content. I watch you guys as streamers and I say, that's so cool, I wish I could do that. Then I work harder at playing the game in order to be able to. That's fine. And in this case, with the Battle of the 5 armies, as it were, it's bottlenecked by the acquisition of the items. It costs you 5 emblems, some of which are quite expensive to do. And so if a new player says, I feel I can do this because the streamers can do it, and then they waste their emblems, they're going to quickly learn not to have expectations that they can. So what we learned from introducing the map system is as long as it's expensive to try the hard thing, then it's okay. If you could just press the button and dial it up all the way. Like this is exactly the thing that was happening on Reddit this week with, is there a button I can click to tag all the monsters so that I get to fight everything, right? If someone sees a streamer do that and the streamer handles it, everyone will assume that's the right way to play, and then they'll get wrecked. And so this is why you kind of have to do a DPS check of proving you can actually fight the monsters before you get to fight the monsters.
Okay, I like that answer. That's cool. Since we know that with this league and how we're going to do the 5 armies is with the special 5 map device, I'm just curious, what came first, 5-slot map device or 5 armies?
5 armies. That required a 5-slot device, and then the fact that you get to put 4 fragments in with your maps is a nice upside of that, which we thought would be a cute thing that we can do to make it interesting for regular mappers too.
Nice.
On the topic of that, since you're like encouraging further map device or map investment with a larger device, are you happy with the current level of investment that most players are seeing and the sort of burden to make that investment in a trade league?
We're pretty happy with it. I talked to the guys who know this a lot better than I do, and they seemed quite pleased with the amount of engagement there is with scarabs and the fragments. We will certainly experiment with the concept of giving more scope for this in the future. Like, this again comes down to picking risk and reward. You're choosing to pay a in-game price in order to make your content more risky. If you can't handle the map, then you just wasted your scarabs and so on. And so it's a good system, we feel, for having optional additional rewards from the maps that you're playing. And I suspect that there's a more complicated, longer version of the answer about what things the team is unhappy with players doing, but they didn't represent that to me to talk about, so I just have a positive impression of it.
Just a really tiny throwaway point. I have a friend who constantly farms Shaper, and he says you have to mention that when you have the 5-slot device, please make sure they still go in the right order, so you're not having to manually swap them around. I just thought I'd throw it.
I'm sure that'll come up in QA.
Okay. I just did that to win brownie points. So getting into the whole like incubator side of things that you briefly touched on it. So as far as I'm aware, you came up with incubators yourself. If so, what kind of sparked the idea and what were you like trying to solve?
Well, I've wanted to do incubation items for a very, very, very long time. Like it's been in the design doc for like since 2008 or something, right? You know, the intention is that we do incubation items. And so we're having a frustrating conversation where we had to work out, okay, what is the reward that this will be a little bit of backstory as to how we do this kind of thing. So what is the reward going to be in terms of crafting stuff from, you know, just general like new things that you get from Legion? Because obviously in Synthesis, we had quite a lot of new mechanics. In Delve, we have the fossils and so on and so on. There's usually some kind of thing that gives you access to a new type of item. And we don't have to go totally strong on this every league, especially if we're like revamping Melee or something or making a sequel to Breach at the same time. But we needed something to talk about. So we started off by saying, let's do currency items, lots of them. So we came up with a bunch of brainstorming. We came up with wacky currency items, and the list got whittled down to 0. Because at the moment, none of those were compelling enough for us to actually go all in on doing it, right? We have really cool ideas that we'll probably use in the future, but the idea of coming up with crazy currency items themed around all the different legions that are good for all types of players just gave us a bunch of currency we can use later that aren't Legion themed. So then we thought, what next? And our next idea, and I'm throwing these out there because these aren't things we're doing at the moment, our next idea was itemized weapon enchants, because now enchantments are a separate slot. And people complain about the fact that the ones from the Labyrinth aren't tradable. We thought, let's do weapon ones. Let's make them itemized so they're tradable, and let's have some cool stuff there. And so we thought about this for a while, and again, we came up with some cool ideas, which we may use for weapon enchants, whether they're itemized or not in the future. Yeah, that's true. And there's problems there. Like a 200 item needs to have like potentially 2 weapon enchants on it, or stronger weapon enchants. And so we came up with a bunch of roadblocks. And this is the point where we're getting, you know, late enough in the dev cycle that we want something straightforward, right? And so we're frustrated, and we kept having meetings, and days are going by, and we're not thinking of something. And I'm just like, guys, let's just do incubation. You slap this currency item on, you get an item out in 300 kills or 1,000 kills. And there was a pause, and everyone's like, okay, that's awesome. And then it went through a few versions. We tried versions where it specifically tells you exactly what you're incubating. Like you right-click on the thing that says you're going to get a unique armor. You click on your boots, and it says you're going to get Kalm's Heart. And you're like, okay, that's amazing. I'm getting Kalm's Heart. And that feels good. But every other item you're getting in terms of an armor that isn't something valuable feels really bad to have to grind out. And so we had a version where you stick it on the item, and it gives you like a div card every 1,000 kills without needing to be refreshed. And that's like you choosing your farming mode, for example. And we eventually stopped doing that one for various reasons. And so the version that you see here, where the incubators are used once each, and they give you a broad category of thing where it's rolled at the end, basically delaying a guaranteed drop, is the version that we feel fits Path of Exile best at the moment.
Okay. I mean, so I had a question about this in terms of, because I think it's important when you add currency items or anything that drops in an abundance that there's an actual point to it, like why we're farming it. Because it sounded to me that you kind of just willy-nilly it just decided, okay, this is what we're doing, without having a broader like overall goal of why you're putting it in. If you're trying to solve something, if you're trying to make an interesting addition to PoE, because there is so much clutter already in PoE of items and things to pick up. So why are we doing this rather than something else?
Some backstory here is we like the idea of deterministic finding. Deterministic farming. This is something that div cards have worked towards. Div cards are great, and people like them, but they could still go a lot further, right? Like there's 100 complaints we can have with div cards with the way they work. This is helping that a little bit. In Path of Exile, if you want to find, especially in solo self-found, for example, if you want to find a specific thing, you kind of can't. You have to just literally wait for it to randomly happen with very few mechanics that let you deterministically get there. And of course, trade mitigates this somewhat, but not everyone's playing with trade, not everyone engages with trade, and even traders like the idea of actually directing what they're looking for. And so we have a strong force in the background to try to get more deterministic farming in there. And league mechanics like this are a great way to do it, because when we add div cards, they're there in the game forever. That's something we have to stand behind. Whereas with incubators, if it doesn't work, you won't see them again in 3 months, right? Like if it just is a total mess and it's not fun and it feels like cluttered or obligatory, then then it's not something that will be kept around. Having said that, incubators are not as common as you may think, right? This is not a thing where like you're constantly juggling 11 of them simultaneously that are triggering all over the place. Some of these do some pretty powerful things, and if you're not trading for them, you're probably only going to have a few active at once. I mean, it depends what you prioritize, right? If you, as soon as you do a Legion encounter, you run to find incubators, you ignore the other rewards, and you're going for incubators, or all the currency you get, you trade for incubators. Those people are going to have a bunch of incubators. But a regular player choosing risk and reward properly and going for the right valuable items, which aren't necessarily the incubators, depending on what you see in the encounter, those players may only have a few active at once. And so the thing that causes them to have actual decisions to make here is pretty much what they're trading for. And whether they're even wanting to go for incubators versus other types of items. So we feel there are still a lot of decisions that people can make, but it isn't the case that your inventory has 50 of them and you have to like constantly juggle them back onto your items all the time.
It kind of worries me from someone who, if you want to play Trade League, and you've ever tried to trade for, say, essences in an abundance, this becomes a problem. And if you want to play SSF, if you want to deterministically farm for something, this becomes a problem. Because if they aren't really dropping that much, you're not really deterministically farming anything. You're just saying, that thing looks cool and powerful. I'm just going to slap that on. I'm never going to be fully slotted anyways. So why didn't it just drop in the first place? And then if you're on the trade league, when you're, just to finish the point, if you need to trade for everything, it becomes a real hassle to go through it.
There's a couple of reasons why we have them dropping after a delay, right? Because there's the question of why not just have it that the monster drops that item? And part of it is because we can actually give a lot better rewards if the player has to go and kill a bunch of things and jump through some hoops. And there's a few levels of randomness here, right? You see that a monster has an incubator, you don't know what type it is. You kill it, you find out what type it is. You then have to choose whether you're using it now or trading it later or whatever, and then you get a random result upon it being actually dropped at the end. And these categories are often more interesting than just you're getting a unique, right? Like, I mean, sure, everyone wants uniques, but there's some interesting stuff here which is going to cause people to actually, what's the best way to describe this? I think that it'll be quite exciting to both get an incubator and look at what possibilities could occur and then farm towards it and then get a result out the other end. Because even if the result isn't something that you can necessarily use in your character, it's still something that's useful for you to have for trade. And you can pessimistically look at it and say, why not drop the item at the beginning? But we're not really interested in having it that these monsters drop a guaranteed unique every time you kill them. But the idea of making you work for a unique is something we can totally get behind. That's what lets us give you more powerful results.
I like the comparison to div cards, actually, in more than one way, because with div cards, essentially, you're being told if you go to this place and kill enough monsters, you have a pretty good chance eventually of getting a tabula or something. Whereas with an incubator now, you get the incubator and you have a guaranteed tabula if you go and kill enough monsters in this place or whatever place. So it's sort of like a div card set that has a hard limit on how many monsters you actually have to kill before it ends up being turned in. That's what it seems like to me, at least. But it's not as deterministic, you're saying.
Right.
It's
you may also find...
Go ahead.
There may also be eye-level abuse that people can work out, right? Like it may be, this depends how it ends up in terms of the rules here, because we are trying to stop abuse, but it may be that you actually want a tabula, and so, oh, how many unique armors are there at level 1, right? You know, maybe there's things you can do. Now, we're trying to stop that. We want it so that people aren't going and slapping the stuff on level 1 characters and just farming tabulas all day, because that's not really playing the game. But you never know with this, right? Like, do you remember with Ancient Orbs making the spider shield and stuff, like Osadea or whatever? You know, there's this kind of thing, which is part of the game, right? That's the right way to play. We don't look at that and think, you know, we screwed up. We look at that and think, these guys are smart. That's awesome. That's really cool. What more uniques can we add to shields to make that not possible? You know, so we suspect that with incubators, there's going to be a bit of finessing that the advanced players can do.
I guess one of the nice things about it, so correct me if I'm wrong, when you start the Legion, you'll see that like incubator icon above a mob, and you're like, oh, he can drop the incubator. It means that even if you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of like seeing he's going to drop a Void div card. And like the Void isn't always the best div card, but it's a fun div card, so people always get excited when it drops. So I'm guessing even if incubators do end up being slightly underwhelming, that chance it could be amazing will always make it fun.
Yeah, well, I'm all over incubators, right? Like very happy with how they've turned out. Look, I understand that pessimistically you can say it's just a delayed drop of a random thing, and we get random things for fighting monsters, so what's the point? And if we don't have enough of them, then where are the decisions? You can say that, but I think you'll still enjoy it. And it's not the crux of this league, right? There is a lot more stuff like the Legion Jewels. You know? I think people will enjoy incubators. Maybe people who don't want to enjoy them won't enjoy them, but we'll see.
Go
ahead. So my thing about it is because I don't want to come out as pessimistic on this, because this is something that really excites me. So I would really hate to see it not being as as cool and powerful or as a tool that I would want. So I don't get the feeling that I can farm like the smaller currencies. So just a small suggestion is there any way we could maybe for an SSF purpose trade them in and convert them to maybe some lesser powerful ones that we could always just use, so you don't feel like you're wasting your time farming them either. So there's always a use for them.
Yeah, I'll bring it up with the team. There may be things you can do, like a 3-for-1 recipe or that kind of thing potentially. And like, there's a lot of Path of Exile leagues left, right? The next 10 years are going to see 40 leagues. There's going to be a lot of rewards. We're going to get this stuff right over time. Try a bunch of different things. It's going to be pretty interesting.
Have you maybe considered for incubators to have another requirement to hatch other than just kills? Because killing is all we do in PoE. So when somebody goes to trade for a specific item, why would he get an incubator over just buying the item? As I would imagine the price would be pretty similar.
So this is fascinating because the killing is what we do in PoE thing actually was the reason why we went with killing in the end. And we experimented internally with various stuff. Like we had a version where, okay, look, you got this from the Val guy and his enemy is the Maraketh, so you need to go and kill 300 Maraketh guys. And then Path of Exile turns into, where am I finding Maraketh guys? What areas are they in? Okay, this area's got 6. Okay, so I have to do this repeatedly. And that isn't exactly what you were saying, because I understand you were questioning the killing part rather than what you're killing. But if it's like you get 700 crits, or, you know, like dodge 1,000 attacks, or some various other metric, the game now becomes, okay, how am I making an insane evasion character? And maybe that's fun, right? But that should be more for like weird challenges and stuff than the core way you're farming items. So at the end of the day, everyone's killing monsters in Path of Exile. So we went with killing, so it's fully aligned with the thing that the game supports. And I get it. Like it's a little boring to say kill more monsters, and that's how you get the reward. And you know, again, you can look at it pessimistically, but it is the most fun, in our opinion, to align it with the thing that everyone's good at doing, and everyone's already rewarded for doing.
Could we have a sneak peek on the number? Because I think the highest we've seen so far was like 5,000, which wasn't that impressive.
I haven't personally seen a number higher than that because I haven't looked at the table of the insane ones, but there's a table of insane ones I'm sure I'm going to check out after this call, and because that is certainly something I've forgotten to look at. Okay. I don't think any of them are going to involve actual insanity, right? Like there isn't one that says there's a guaranteed mirror and the numbers of 10 million. I mean, maybe there is, but I'm pretty sure there isn't.
Okay.
That would be pretty cool. Maybe I can make it happen.
I think you should. I think my biggest question is, will there be a audio or visual like feedback when the egg pops?
Yeah, there is an effect that plays. My personal impression of the first iteration of the effect was it could be more visual, like it was easy to miss, but that was 2 weeks ago, and it's probably been improved since then. This is tricky though, because with a week to go, we have to prioritize the right things, right? And making that effect really cool. It's great, we'll do it, but should it be in by release? We have other stuff. Like, I have to stress here, like, the work we've done on Melee has changed the game end to end. There are so many weird bugs we're dealing with at the moment. Like, I had an alpha tester yesterday say to me, are you sure you can release this in a week? And thankfully, the alpha version's a few days behind, but there's some rough going on that we're working on here, right? Like, this, because of this, there'll be a couple of things like how visible the incubator effect is, where we just deal with that in a week's time when we can do, because we're focusing right now on making sure that, like, you know, Molten Strike does damage again and that kind of thing.
Fun bit of trivia, when Jonathan was recording the Baeclast episode for us, just before we went live, he said that Cleave is broken on our build. So I can't show you Cleave. So it's like, okay.
I can name 300 things that are broken that won't be in a week's time, hopefully.
Oh no.
It's kind of funny because we like, obviously there's time pressure with releasing these, right? We have 13 weeks to make an awesome release. And usually what happens is there's lack of polish on the league, right? We've released leagues where it's a bit confusing. We'd love to get more stuff in. This time, the league is real solid, and there's just a bunch of broken stuff because we went and changed how the core of the game works. And so we're trying very hard to get all that polished up and fixed in time. Legion itself is looking really good.
Nice.
I guess one of the other advantages, even though I'm sure there'll be a lot of depth in Legion, but the fact it has relative simplicity, is that if you do need to make changes, you won't be in the synthesis issue where it's like, how do we possibly change this? You know, it's quite...
Yeah. Synthesis was certainly tricky because everyone had their existing complicated states, and so we couldn't just change the rules easily without considering the fact that they've got a board covered in things. That was very stressful. But Legion is a lot simpler because, you know, it's like Breach with a more complicated endgame, basically, and quite a lot more productive values.
I don't envy you going in and trying to fiddle with synthesis. Like there was one patch, I think maybe a month and a bit into the league, where the like invisible border around the wall of synthesis got moved out slightly, which is an incredibly minor thing. It didn't even actually change where the pieces could spawn. It just changed what direction they could spawn in when they were at the very edge, and even that bricked some people's charts. I remember there was a Reddit thread about it where people got real mad. So yeah.
Yep, I remember. And we get situations where we have some guy get an impossible layout, and because our math was wrong and how we were calculating where things go, and then like we need 4 senior people to spend 6 hours rewriting stuff and making a tool to fix these 4 people that are affected by it, and there's like a full day of development going for the senior part of the team, and you know, it's very time consuming to deal with complicated leagues.
Yeah, I think one of the very reassuring things about Legion is the main complaint I've seen is, will the timer be too long? And that's a relatively easy thing to fix.
That's certainly the case. I mean, look, we can tweak it. If we get a situation where you break up all the monsters and you sit there for 10 seconds, then it's very fixable, right? We can have them. We can have the timer end early. We can make it harder and more rewarding. It takes 2 hours to change that, right? Like I think they've already done it to so that the timer end. If you kill all the monsters, then the timer does end immediately. I'm pretty sure it's something that's already been done. Yeah, as Jonathan points out, it spawns like 300 monsters. Good luck freeing them all.
Nice.
Okay.
That's a good counterpoint.
It's slightly more than we saw in the trailer.
They
Okay.
go out quite a lot further as well. You have to be using Tornado Shot or something.
Wow.
Chris
Okay.
confirmed Tornado Shot Helm Enchant this
Not
league.
melee.
It's the actual trailer thing where, like, you know, you've improved melee, but Tornado Shot's still the key anyway.
Since you mentioned Tornado Shot and you did briefly talk about Enchants earlier, has there been any more development on Helm Enchants?
This is a complicated topic that's mentioned a lot, and I think the line that we used in the Balance Manifesto for Tuesday is something like, yeah, we're aware people are complaining, but we haven't changed how that works yet. It's tricky. We like how it works, and okay, so there's a supported playstyle in Path of Exile that we like, which is someone going and being good at lab runs and farming enchants and making a ton of money in game, right? We want the person to say, I'm good at this, everyone else is bad, they can't deal with it, they hate the lab, and I'm going to just make a ton of exalts from doing this strategy. And we like to support that kind of thing. That's a bunch of people there who are doing that as a service. And I get that it's a bit fiddly, and as we add more skills to the game, it only makes the enchant situation worse. People want them to be tradable, and people want it so that you get a choice of like 6 and you can put the best one on. And maybe we'll do one or several of these things in the future, but we're very careful to not break a playstyle that a lot of people are enjoying at the moment.
That's fair. Since you said it's something that may be addressed in the future, just kind of on that note, before we go back into 3.7 stuff. So you recently announced that with Syndicate and Masters, you were going to delay that till 3.8 because it needs the proper attention.
Yeah.
Do you want to just elaborate on that a little bit?
So a lot of people are asking, that's cool, we're happy with you delaying it, but what are the changes? And part of the thing here is we don't actually have time to work out the exact changes, right? Like, I'd love to say stuff, but it's not confirmed. We have some pretty cool plans that we have to actually agree on 100% internally and test out a bit before we can say. And the problem here is just finding time to actually agree on it, right? Like, we're at a point now where we need to be working on Legion and the melee stuff for the last few weeks. It's just been, to get this done on time, we have to think about nothing else. And so the 3.8 changes to the old leagues, we're keen to lock that in, right? 3.8 is going to have a league. It's going to have some other stuff that we haven't decided yet. You know, whatever, you know, like how we did melee and spellcasting. There'll be something, right? We'll work it out. And it's going to have some changes to the old leagues to make them good. And so by this, we've committed to the fact that we're actually putting some effort into those changes. We're not just band-aiding it a little bit. And so that's now part of 3.8's identity. But it does mean we can't tell you anything about what the changes are, apart from the things we've announced. Like Soulfight is going to be shared across the account. The Betrayal State is going to be shared across the account. These are things, well, I guess account league rather than account. These are things that are easy for us to confirm, but there's a lot of fine detail in there that we don't actually want to commit to, because it will really suck if we have to change our mind. And like this happened before when we announced in a news post how the Mastermind reset stuff was going to work in Betrayal. We said, this is the new plan. And then we changed it a week later by editing the news post and forgetting to like make a Reddit thread about it or whatever. And people were unhappy that we announced one thing and did a different thing because the first thing didn't work.
I can see Raiz. Go on, what do you want to say? I can see you want to say something.
No, nothing. That's just, yeah. It's good that you aren't planning to do something like that in the future, yeah. I think that's way better than releasing changes that just weren't ready, yeah.
There,
Go on, Octavian.
so if I can go off maybe on a little bit of a tangent, there are some systems in the game though that, due to previous band-aid fixes or just how they've been implemented in going into core, like the first one that immediately comes to mind is Incursion, operate very differently in presumably an unintended way than how they did when they were initially implemented. So like Alva, for instance, you can't get the same room twice within an instance of 3 because she spawns in a map, and probably due to, you know, like actual limitations in the game, you can't get the same room twice in the same map. With, you know, even a simpler league like Legion being packaged alongside animation changes, so sort of cannibalizing that time that might otherwise have been used for band-aid fixes being, you know, brought up to par. When in your development cycle do you see time for that sort of thing, the sort of middle priority stuff?
It's pretty rough to fit it in, but we have to like just slot these in when we can, right? Like 3.8 is getting the stuff that people have brought up about Syndicate and Delve. Like people want this to be better. We agree. If you look at the things that are bad in Path of Exile right now that we've ticked Melee off the list, it could be argued that people's dislike of some of the betrayal content is one of the things that needs to be addressed, even though it's relatively recent content.
There is one thing I could say around this, which is that the particular thing the particular thing that we hear as the thing that we see is that we need to fix is that people right now feel like there's too much stuff going on at the same time in the game. So like, you know, you go into a map and there could there's just too many different possible things that could occur that you need to spend time on. So the thing we want to fix a little bit more is the fact that people feel like people want to be able to engage in the different systems like independently. Like I'm going to like do some incursion stuff for a while, and then I'm going to do some betrayal stuff for a while, and that kind of stuff. So that is the thing that in 3.8 we will be looking into doing this as well. I'm not going to talk about what the system is, but that is the complaint that we're looking to address in like the particular, you know, and that is the thing we will definitely be doing in 3.8. We just don't want to talk about exactly how it will end up, but that's sort of like the thrust of what we're trying to fix here. So yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right. Also, make sure to check out Jonathan's ExileCon t-shirt, the Solaris.
All right, yeah.
The Solaris and Lunaris shirt.
Yeah.
We only have one of those, and Jonathan's got it on.
Cool.
Quick question on the betrayal. So did you end up fast tracking that since you saw it as a problem coming out of nowhere, or was it something you were
Fast tracking
already
what? Sorry.
planning? Just like the fact that you were dealing with betrayal and old content like in 3.8, but you haven't really done that much before.
We've certainly had to focally say, if we're going to push this to 3.8, we have to then actually deliver it in 3.8. So we've had to make that commitment, right? Beforehand, we would have loved to just be vague about it and fix it when we feel like it, but now we have to do it because we've said we are. And so if that's the wrong thing for 3.8, you're getting the wrong thing.
Well, you definitely did it in style, I can tell you that much. The pan over was pretty epic.
Since we've been blasting through this topic list actually quite quickly, are there any more questions about Legion or Incubators that you feel like we rushed you over? No? Okay then.
Wait, who's that directed at?
Either anything Chris wants to mention about it, or like Raiz, you've had a few times you've been like...
No, I'm just astonished.
Okay.
I'm very excited about the amount of mobs for Legion. That sounds really cool.
My personal thoughts here are the ideal league from my point of view is people watch the trailer, they get hyped, and then they don't ask questions, and the league comes out and they enjoy their face value, right? The problem with trying to understand it too much beforehand is you kind of, I don't know, it's like let's say there's a board game, I want to play Settlers of Catan, I don't go online and read guides on how to play it before I play the first few games legitimately, and I understand Path of Exile is competitive, and we're happy to answer how things work. But, you know, I kind of feel you can just play it and find out, right? It lets it take a little longer and it's more fun, isn't it?
Actually, on that note, do you guys see Path of Exile the way you develop it as like a competitive game? Because very frequently people mention it as a solo game.
Everything's competitive because you get things other people want. We have full trade available unless you're explicitly playing an SSF, right? You are getting things that are valuable that you could trade to your friends or not. And being more effective at the game gives you better stuff, right? We found out that the PvP in Path of Exile is nothing to do with actually hitting each other in an arena. The PvP is having more exalts than your friend.
Makes sense.
I mean, I kind of knew that from D2 already, but, you know.
Okay, well, so to get more into like general 3.7 stuff, so one of the most exciting and slightly worrying things that's coming is the updated Aoe visuals for all of the abilities. Since you've said yourself already with Legion, they're like all these monsters and they're all doing all these crazy attacks. Is there a real concern that screen clutter's just going to get worse in 3.7?
The people working on Legion have told me that screen clutter will be worse than Legion content, right? They've specifically warned me that right now it's amazing in terms of the amount of fighting going on, but it's pretty cluttered. So yeah, we maybe won't do that every single league, but you guys wanted a lot of monsters to fight. We'll see how that goes. It's caused us to make a lot of performance improvements related to this kind of stuff as well. There's a lot of experimental tech. I don't know if it's going in 3.7.0, but we're hoping to. Especially for consoles and stuff that Jonathan's team have been working on. So that's probably going to have game-wide improvements once we do get it finished.
It's more to do with the number of monsters.
Yeah, mostly that one's mostly to do with quantity of monsters, rather than the fact that there are a lot of effects going on. We are fully aware of the clutter issue, right? We don't want to spam the screen with too much stuff, but having the visuals actually accurately reflect what they're doing is important, right? If we draw a small effect and it's lying to you about where the damage is, that's not helping anyone. We would rather draw an appropriate, like maybe we need to tone down what these look like. The community have asked for sliders, they've asked for transparency, they've asked for lots of stuff that we're a bit resistant to, but we'll find a solution. If clutter is a problem, we don't want the game to be bad. And bear in mind, clutter means overdraw. Overdraw is when you're drawing multiple effects on top of each other and you max out your graphics card's fill rate and the game is slow. And everyone who says, Path of Exile is a slow game, look at this performance, all the other games work fine on my computer, why is this game so slow? The game is heavily optimized, right? It's done very efficiently. The problem is there's so much stuff happening in Path of Exile compared to other games. Like in League of Legends, you do an attack and it fires a few projectiles or something. In Path of Exile, your cast on crit character spawns 10,000 in the same time period. There's a lot going on in Path of Exile, and because of that, it runs really slow sometimes, especially on older computers. And so where there's clutter, there's slowness, and we want both to be gone while still having the game accurately reflect what's going on. And we want to somehow achieve this without actually preventing you having your 10,000 cast on crit projectiles, because that build is fun because of that.
I think.
Sorry for the random.
No, it's fine. I think one of my biggest issues with it personally is when you get into the group content, and having some kind of reduced transparency on group content will be very important, especially since when we've had leagues like Legion, where it's like the main reward is this big thing at the end, I foresee most of Legion for top-end trade league players will be doing boss rotations. So we're going to see scenarios where you've got 5 legions, a full party, all crazy effects, everyone's got way more AoE, we have more instant abilities that we're meant to be weaving into our combat, and I think that might be a real crash problem, like, as we saw with like Beachhead in the past and like Uber Breachstones and everything.
We'll work on it if it's an issue. I mean, we're confident it's probably going to be pretty awesome. There's performance work going on. There's a lot more ability for players to get out of the way of combat. If they are seeing something that's scary and they can't quite read what abilities are going on, you can get out of that a lot more quickly now. I mean, it's true in real life. If you go to an actual war zone where they're dropping bombs everywhere, you probably don't have a good idea exactly what's happening. You just don't want to be in that. You get 50 meters away and shoot at them.
On the topic of clutter, since you have a more deterministic loot system with Legion, allowing you to like notice, oh, that guy's got currency and that guy's got an incubator and whatever, does that then give you freedom to reduce the overall amount of drops that are coming from these enemies, because you're guaranteed to have a few good ones, so you don't need this iceberg of loot to support the good drops above them? Or are we gonna have something like Delve or Synthesis or something like that, where you have this huge mountain of loot at the end again?
People do like regular items, and we've learned in the past that if we turn down regular item drops too much, people notice and they call the content unrewarding. We do want it to be rewarding, right? It is league content, but yeah, I'd like to have it so that we're relying more on the interesting rewards. There's a fine line there where we have to make sure that it still feels rewarding while having those rewards be meaningful.
Do you think there's an overall problem in the game then with tuning down the iceberg of loot effect, in that doing that would make the game feel somehow like just viscerally less rewarding when you don't see a million wands, boots, and chess pieces drop at the end of an event?
I think that is true, but at the same time, there's work that we can do on reducing this, and it's a topic that's come up for discussion this week internally. Is when are we doing that? Because here's the thing, right? Like
the thing that I said to Chris recently was, okay, now that we've fixed melee, what's the next like big topic in PoE that someone who sees the game for the first time, like if someone's just like watching a streamer for the first time, what are they going to say is a problem with the game? And I think that the amount of items is definitely one of those things. So it's going to take some kind of change. I don't like whether that happens in 3.8 or 3.9 or something like that. I don't know, but like we have to deal with this at some point. Like it is another millstone we have to sort of somehow deal with.
Our intention initially was, hey, look, 4.0 is going to feel like a new game in many ways, because of all the improvements we've got going on with that one. We've talked about the new character models, but there's a lot more to it. Why not use that as the opportunity to actually fix the item system? The thing is, it doesn't have to be fixed in 4.0. It has to be fixed by 4.0, right? Like with Melee, we're fixing that by 4.0 by releasing it now, so you get to enjoy it for like a year or more, right? 4.0 is late next year as our current estimate, just to be clear about this. It's not a like March thing. 3.9 goes on to 3.10, goes on to 3.11, it goes on to possibly 3.12 at the same time as the 4.0 beta on our current schedule. Anyway, just to clarify, 4.0 is still a while away, because a lot of people are assuming it's March, right? We'll show you at ExoCon, you'll play it, but there's a lot more stuff happening with that one. Anyway, so in 4.0, all of the stuff has to be fixed by then. And so it may be that we pull out the itemization thing to look at earlier than that. Well, this is tricky because we don't want the deliverable to be, and we've reduced item drops, like as the thing that we achieved in the loot, right? No one's going to want to play that. And so there's a lot of discussion of how do we reduce the number of crap items you're never going to pick up while having it that you actually more meaningfully find stuff that's going to help your character without having a D3 style smart drop system where we look at what ascended you are and then try to generate rares for you, because that's kind of lame. So we'll work something out, and we have some cool plans here. But yeah, it's probably too early to speculate on that one.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
It's kind of lame.
Part of the charm of Path of Exile is the variety that you're going up against in terms of what drops, and it's really hard to maintain that while culling the drops, especially because I don't know. I like seeing a big pile of shinies at the end of the thing too.
There are some interesting experiences playing old action RPGs like Diablo 1 and 2, right? Like play Diablo 1, finish the first couple of levels down to the Skeleton King and tell me how many items dropped. The answer might be less than 15, right? There are very few items. Like finding anything is special. That's quite interesting. In Path of Exile, you found 15 items halfway up the first beach. So the second thing is like looking at Diablo 2, a lot of the items that drop that are junk are things that just like random fulminating potions and gold and chipped gems and just stuff that isn't a real item you can equip. It's just random kind of junk. And when we were designing Path of Exile, we said these other action RPGs have this junk. Well, why have it? I mean, I'm very much happy that we got rid of gold. There's great reasons for that. But getting rid of like arrows, right? Like there is a purpose for having. It feels like an item drop, but it's a mechanical thing you do occasionally. We streamlined that out. Maybe that was the wrong choice. Maybe the right choice is to have junk that is an equipment that you kind of tune out with your mind. Anyway, I'm not saying we're introducing that. It's too late for that now. But it is fascinating to know that the actual real item drops in the old action RPGs are a bit lower than people remember. Path of Exile has way too many actual pieces of equipment.
Since we're kind of talking on that, and it's something we haven't spoken about in a long time, do you have any regrets with the implementation of MF? I was recently on a Last Epoch podcast talking to one of the devs about MF, and they were like, we are never adding it to our game. We hate what it does. I'm just curious on what your point of view is.
I really like Magic Find. I think that the person choosing to sacrifice clear speed in order to get better items and having all the interesting decisions about how do I optimize for damage and then optimize for Magic Find is really cool in principle. There are many problems with Path of Exile's implementation of this. The first one being that a rare item you find on the ground is not likely to be useful for you. And that's one of the key things we want to focus with our itemization rework, is to have it so that you're happy to find a rare item. I'm not saying that means there's a lot less of them, but we have it so that, well, you understand about this. We talked about it in the the Q&A part 1, I think, where at the moment there are a lot of reasons why a rare item isn't going to for your character. And so it's much more easily attained by crafting than by just picking stuff up off the ground. Yeah. Yes, I understand. People don't like plus experience. People don't like Magic Find because it causes them, like, the experience thing is worse. Like, I like the concept of someone sacrificing clear speed in order to gain more experience. It's just their party members get really upset by it. And so everyone hates experience items for this reason, viscerally. And we have problems with item quantity. Like MF, actual item rarity stuff is an okay trade-off, except for the fact it doesn't really work in Path of Exile particularly well. Item quantity is a problem because that's way too effective. And so that's why we've been toning that down. Like item quantity might be entirely removed from the game one day, but MF itself, we want to make effective and fix it rather than remove it.
That's fair. I agree with that.
On the note of like icebergs of loot as like a necessity to make people feel rewarded, there is content in PoE as well that where it's not really required that people actively go for. I mean, you will have stuff like Elder and the jewels and such, where you won't complain that there isn't a mountain of loot because you already know. So, I mean, you're already solving the problem a bit yourself, wouldn't you say? I mean, you could add new Legion content as long as the players understand the power that they're getting. Maybe
Yes.
I mean, maybe like early response is not the end all in terms of like giving them iceberg, because then you're kind of giving in and you're setting a precedent.
Yep, I understand what you're saying. And to some extent, we've experimented this with various leagues, right? Like, look at Incursion, where you get the items at the end of the run. Synthesis has various mechanics to do with this. We have Delve screws around with item drops quite a lot and drops them when the crawler gets to the end. We have tried experimentation here because we want to see how people react. In general, they react better when you kill monsters, you get items. Something's missing if you don't get item drops. But yeah, there's just a bigger discussion here.
Moving back into 3.7 for a bit, other than Cyclone, and I have to say that, what abilities are you most excited for as a player?
So I want to play this Blood and Sand Gladiator build, right? It's going to be a lot of fun. I like the idea of micro-swapping between different stances during combat. I'm just jealous of the people in the office who get to film the videos of it. I haven't had a chance to play it yet myself. It's going to be pretty cool. We've changed Lacerate to work with Blood and Sand, and yeah, there's an awesome new skill called Perforate that I'm not supposed to spoil what it does, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Go on.
No.
Okay.
I'm good. I don't want to. I'm not going to ask for spoilers I can't get.
Okay.
Bex would kill me if I spoiled anything here. She needs her teasers.
For Bex's sake, I will ask one question though. So we've mentioned it nearly every single Baeclast, additional keybinds. You keep adding these really cool abilities that people are very excited to use, but they're like, where am I adding this in? And now with Blood and Sand, that's just another button being added to like every melee build. I don't know.
You might find that not every melee build wants to use it unless they can take good advantage of it, right? Like, I mean, there's costs associated with this. The keybinds question is a complicated one. There's a lot of stuff in play, right? Like, we've got 4.0 on the horizon. We have to make sure the changes that we that we make now are compatible with future versions of Path of Exile. There's a lot of stuff going on. One thing we did suggest a while ago was to have it so when you hold control, it gives you a different keybind bar so that you can put your less used stuff on there. You can just hide a bunch of auras and stuff away on control, which pro players will be able to hit fast and have their primary stuff on if they're good at hitting keys fast. We haven't committed to that. It requires a bit of thought. We've got the console platforms as well. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is fair across, that Sony and Microsoft players have good opportunity to get the same thing. So it's a bigger discussion. We can't commit to anything here, but we're not ignoring it. Bex has raised it in response to the Reddit thread. It's prompting discussion. But this goes with the the Betrayal and Delve feedback, where we want to work it out. We just don't have time this week because
you want to do it right.
We want to do it right. We need to focus on getting Legion finished this week.
And I just want to stress the point as well. It's the main frustration I think that comes with it is you keep introducing these really cool skills and the instant defense, and it's not just a case of we're complaining just for the sake of complaining. It's you keep making these new things that we want to use, and it's Focus, for example, was such a cool thing that very, very, very few people ever use because they're just I just cannot physically fit it into my build.
Yeah. I understand. This is the topic. There probably won't be any changes for 3.7.0's launch, but if we're changing how the skill bar works, we can do that halfway through a league. It's not a balance thing so much, right? It affects everyone equally. It's not making one guy's build bad. So maybe we can work something out, right? If it's a problem, keep telling us it's a problem. We love seeing angry Reddit threads. It makes our day.
I'm sure Reddit will give you plenty of angry threads going into the new league. I don't think you ever need to worry about losing those.
That's getting quoted, right? Next time, Synthesis, when there was 5 threads of just Synthesis this, Synthesis that. It's we love it.
I'm only writing this because Chris asked for it.
On the topic of Synthesis, if I can, jump back, I think, a little bit on our topic list here.
Go for it.
I'm curious as to your perspective on the reception specifically of synthesized implicits, because it seems there was something of a by a larger majority of the player base, at least a larger vocal minority of the player base than I was anticipating. It seemed like there was something of a bitter rejection of some of the more powerful synthesis implicits, which is not something we've really seen with like previous steps forward that I think personally are like close to equivalent in terms of power level, like the perfect double corruption from Incursion, for example, or something like that.
Are you saying that people were unhappy at the power creep implied by those synthesized items?
More that people were unhappy at the power gap between your average player and someone who was taking the time to go after, you know, onslaught moves boots or, you know, enemies explode +1 bow or something like that. When maybe synthesis does push that a little further, but I would argue that previous leagues have had a similar power gap if you have the like perfect end game stuff. But this particular league just rubbed people the wrong way in that regard.
It's hard to predict the results of an experiment like that, but the good thing about leagues is that it gets us a chance. I mean, sure, it puts some powerful items in standard afterwards, but if you can't make more, then those are just interesting things in the economy that gain value, right? Like whoever got them now is worth hundreds of exalts of extra value, and that's how standard works at this stage. There's some crazy stuff from the past in there. But synthesized items are not present in Legion and subsequent leagues until we work out what we're doing with that mechanic. And that's the nice thing about being able to pull things out without an obligation to keep them in the game. I think that we were careful with the power level of the synthesized items. Like we intended for it to be quite a big bump, and it is very hard to do it. Like it involves engaging with a lot of complicated content, working out how the synthesized stuff works. It was very unfortunate that we accidentally had that data mineable. We realized 20 minutes too late, literally, that the table was exposed to the client, and then all the data was there. And then, like, we totally should have caught that a day earlier, because that would have made it a lot harder for people to work out how to make them. That's a lesson.
The reason why synthesis, I think, was different in this regard is because we put a system that was really an in-game system too early in the game. So this is my honest reason why I think that this was a problem. I think that the system was too complicated to expose to players like that early, and what we should have done was move that reward system really late, and I think that would have changed the perception quite a lot. Because when you put it early, that means that a lot of early players have access to it, and that means they're doing things like that requires the system has the ability to produce garbage at the early game. And so that suddenly means that like you've got this big disparity between like the worst possible and the best possible. And so I think that was the fundamental mistake of that particular system. It was just too early. If that had been late game only, then that would have totally changed, I think, how that would have been received, and also how we would have designed it suddenly as well in terms of the balance there. So yeah.
So Jonathan's addressing the people complaining about bad synthesized outcomes, and my points were more to the fact that the synthesized outcomes were quite a high degree of power creep, as some people, you know, that was very hard to obtain. Like it's unfair that how did he get this stuff when I can't get it, and so on. So there were problems all over the place with that system, but we still like it, right? It's power creep in an axis that we hadn't done before. It's going to be valuable in standard. You'll probably see it again. We intentionally didn't allow the implicits on uniques, so we still have screwing around with implicits on uniques as a space we can look at in the future. There was a lot of internal pressure for us to just allow uniques to be synthesized, by the way. Like I had to specifically shut that down as something that we could do in the future, because that's even more crazy power creep if we'd allowed it.
Something Incursion kind of did well, where most of the time when you were leveling, the items you found weren't particularly useful, but every now and then you found something really catered towards your character, and it was really, really powerful, even as early as like level 12 or something. So that was pretty cool. It is weird that you guys never kind of allow players to go for the items that they were specifically looking for. Yeah, was that a thought at any point, or?
Do you mean in terms of allowing more control over the synthesized outcomes?
No. More control over what items would drop from incursions. Completely separate question, yeah.
Right. What was wrong with the items that dropped from incursions? Wasn't it just random stuff?
Yeah, it was just random, exactly.
Oh,
Right. So the rewards that do you mean
the bosses?
He means at the very end, when you killed the boss, you had no real idea of what you were getting. You weren't like, oh, I've done the fire room, so I'm going to get a fire staff. It was just, I'm just going to get whatever.
Right. Well, we put the rewards for the rooms in the rooms, right? Like they had chests and various machines and stuff like that. By the way, we have an incursion change I don't think we've talked about. I believe it now has 12 rooms rather than 11. 12 incursions, that is, rather than 11 to get Temple. So this is both divisible by 3, which is nice, so that you don't get the weirdness at the end, but it also gives you more opportunity to get a tier 3 room because of this. So it's explained better in the balance manifesto that the team have written up, but that is a incursion thing that we're changing in 3.7.0.
Can I just ask the question, is it a good room? And I know that sounds like a really dumb question. It's
No,
just
I'm
with
not saying
tormented
there's an
spirits.
additional room.
Oh, there's just an additional one that
talking about
spawns. Okay, yeah, sorry.
I'm saying that you
Yeah,
do 4
12
sets of 3
Okay, yeah, yeah.
rather than 3 sets of 3 and an extra 2.
Okay.
So it's
okay.
By the way, you said earlier that you were like, oh, there must be some limitation of the game that means that we can't have the same room spawning and incursion
in the same area.
But the reason for that is purely because, like, we have to decide what rooms are going to be spawning in the area at the point where it's generated. Like, we can't generate terrain after the level is already, like, created. So, like, because we have to pre-decide that, there would be no way for us to know what the level of the room would have to be after the point we visited previously in the same area, if you see what I'm
This is
saying.
to avoid a load screen.
Like, so basically, yeah, like, sort of like, to understand the fundamental thing here, it's like, okay, like, if you change what happened in a room and you were able to go back there again, that would mean that we wouldn't know how to generate that room, like at the start of the level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is the reason why there's that limitation.
So we have time travel paradoxes to
Yeah,
deal
so
with
I mean,
at
like,
work
it's
every
kind
day.
of like, yeah, this is like a sort of.
I mean, it's similar to the problems with betrayal and some of the issues you've had with that, I imagine, where like what was it? If you in Betrayal League itself, if you had a Zana mission in a map and you did the betrayal event in the regular map and then went to do the Zana, you'd have issues because you might have interacted with that branch.
Yeah, there's like betrayal was actually really hard to fit into to have more encounters in one instance, and the reason why we really want to do it that way rather than having just like one thing that we could do is like rather than having in one area is have 3 times as many incursions. But the problem we feel with that is that it's like then you feel like there's just incursions in practically every area then, and it's like okay, how is it different from
Yeah, and then the master missions are less impactful.
And the master missions are less impactful. Like it's better to have them like a bit more like density of like. So when you do encounter this thing, you get it like quite densely for a little while. But then of course that leads to its own technical problems. Like betrayal was probably the hardest one to pack down after the fact, which is kind of why it has more issues after it was merged than when it was actually in the original league. Like there's kind of just a lot of technical challenges with that, unfortunately.
Yeah. To cut a long story short, you can have anyone crop up due to the fact that your actions can change the board. We then have to preload everyone, which takes a while in the background, and hence the lag. And it's really kind of intractable so far because every solution we think of makes it a lot worse. And so that's why it's going to take some time in 3.8 to actually work out which of these hard solutions is the right one to solve that problem.
It sounds to me like as far as Alva goes, the only compromise like currently available without some sort of innovation would be just changing the way it generates and adding loading screens into each of these, so they're not actually baked into the zone that you're entering, which that's not a compromise you guys are willing to make.
Well, we put so much effort into avoiding load screens here. Like each league, like Synthesis, has so much work went into avoiding load screens between areas that we eventually stripped out and just went with load screens between areas, didn't we, Joel?
Yes, originally you were going to be able to go to multiple islands without having load screens, and it is actually implemented.
Yeah, but there are so many weird border cases.
There were so many problems with it, and then we also ran into lots of resource problems because when you have lots of different tile sets loaded, you start running out of memory.
Especially on console.
Especially on console, but I mean, even on PC, it was a problem. So yeah, we ended up scrapping that, which was kind of unfortunate.
But we did manage to achieve it with Incursion. But you're right, if we throw a load screen in there, it solves some problems. But then, well, load screens are bad for people with slow computers, right? Yeah. There are people with old hard drives and they have to wait 45 seconds, and this is a bad experience. At the moment, we managed to slip in a few areas that share a tile set. It doesn't add very much time to the first load, and it means that the players get into the content straight away. Like they press the portal, instantly they're in there.
This might be a bit of a inflammatory question, but since we've started seeing it where you've dropped support for older machines, do you imagine by the end of next year with 4.0, it's kind of like, this is an SSD only game. Go away if you've got an old hard drive.
No. So the hard drives are going to get a huge performance boost as soon as we're able to merge the tech we did for PlayStation 4 into PC. So currently PlayStation 4, which actually does fast load times than PC with a hard drive, and that's just because there's like a new resource system that we did for PS4, which hasn't made its way to PC yet, but we will get that in, and then that will fix the problems with hard drives on PC that there are. So that will get better. I just don't know exactly when, but yeah, too far.
So for the people who say, why don't they improve the performance and tech of the game, Jonathan is like an army of people working on it. There's so much stuff there. It's just we don't like to talk about it because if we say, look, we improved performance, people say, I hate you, this game is slow, and it's just a bad experience for us. So we prefer to work with actions rather than words, that we're making it better rather than being too communicative on that one.
Well,
so there's stuff going on.
I'm very glad that you broke down exactly why Alva operates the way that she does now, because I kind of am on your side with the decision as to how it's implemented now, because I don't want people having to wait for like minute-long loading screens each alpha in a map either. But hopefully there's a way to solve that issue, because it is a particularly annoying one as the leagues go on and you become, more and more aware of just how difficult it is to target farm the rooms you want.
Yeah, I understand. And we are removing the crafting recipe unlocks from tier 3 rooms in, I think this is something too. So I think it's now just tier 1, 2, or 3 of that version, so it's much easier to hit. So there's a few bits and pieces. And then there's a 3.7.0 change, I think. So the answer of what are we doing to help the betrayal stuff does have a little bit of stuff in 3.7.0.
That's just the random.
Yeah, random incident.
On the note of the of how do you implement a league in the next league, like how do you like boil it down to like fit? Wouldn't the more obvious way is keep it close to the original rather than having to refit it?
Keeping it close to the original is hard because the leagues are designed in their own form area. And something like Breach is easy. You just go, okay, it only shows up occasionally. Breach is rarely done. And we could totally do that for the Legion content, right? Oh, look, you found a monolith. Congratulations. Have fun with that. It would work quite well. This is going to be a super easy league to integrate. I'd love to get it into the core game. No promises yet. We literally don't decide for a few months. But yeah, something like Synthesis, on the other hand, would be very, very complicated to integrate in cleanly.
And one could say Incursion and Betrayal as well, because they have these elaborate systems. And they don't, like, once you put 3, it gets all these other problems.
Certainly. And we're working on this, right? Like one of our things we've talked about with 3.8 is the fact that we want to make the other leagues be better citizens in the game.
To get slightly back onto 3.7, because we could probably spend 8 hours talking about the implementation of past leagues. Alongside the general melee changes coming, we've heard there might be some passive tree and mechanical changes to improve the state of underused weapon types like 2-hand, 1-hand, and shield. Could you maybe expand on that a little bit?
I was given one tidbit to talk about here. For the rest, you have to wait for the Balance Manifesto, which is written, but it's being translated, and you've got to wait till Tuesday, New Zealand time, so a few days. Okay, so the one tidbit to talk about is previously there was a damage bonus on 200 weapons, which was arbitrary and something like 40%, but it varied from weapon to weapon. Now this is 60% across the board. So 200 weapons do more damage relative to what they did before. There'll be more information in the Balance Manifesto. Is
that 60% increased or 60% more?
I think that it is just...
Well, it's the base damage of the
yeah,
weapon.
it's a multiplicative part. I understand that the default thing to ask for any Path of Exile thing is it increased or more because of the meme. But yeah, it's just that it is 60% more than what the equivalent one-handed thing would do.
Okay. So on
jump...
that... go on.
Oh.
No.
I kind of want to jump forward a little bit on the on all the new Legion stuff that we're getting, because we're getting all the active mitigation skills, and we haven't really talked about that. Is it like is it a decision that you've made that you want to have active mitigation as a new kind of like tool that players have? Because you have movement skills, your damage ability, and will you now have an active defensive mechanic as like a core part of the game?
So you're referring to stuff like Steel Skin and so on that you basically have to
yes, and Molten Shell, yeah.
This is stuff now that we can do that we previously couldn't. Like way back, early Path of Exile, due to the fact that the way that action prediction works to mitigate latency and so on, when a monster starts to attack you, that damage is going to happen. It's just locked in and it's going to occur. now there's so much more stuff that's actually, doing fine timing and so on. Like Jonathan's rework of melee stuff has meant that you can walk out of the way of the attack and it doesn't hit you, even if it had predicted how much damage. Because for latency purposes, we have to tell the person in advance how much damage is coming and that kind of stuff, so it looks seamless, even though there's latency in play. Anyway, this has had a lot of rework, and now it's possible. Because previously, if you hit your Granite Flask after Brutus starts a swing, you would take the full damage. This has all changed now. Now all these active things let you actually respond to stuff well. And so that's something we would love to have done from the beginning. And we can provide that experience for players. Raising the skill cap of playing Path of Exile is certainly good, because previously it really was the case that you kind of just mash your character against the monsters to some extent. There was little actual moment-to-moment mattering where you click. You just hit your tornado shot somewhere on the screen and monsters die.
On that note, so since Immortal Core's been reworked, a buff in many cases, but a nerf in a few, how has there been any changes to Porcupine on death effects, since before that was the only thing people used to use for Porcupines?
We have popcorn. It's lots of popcorn at the office, and we're going to watch Twitch, and people are going to die, and then we're going to eat the popcorn.
Nice.
No, I'm kidding. The team understand about the Porcupine issue, and we'll do something at some stage. It might not be in there 3.7.0's launch. Again, just be angry on Reddit, and it will get fixed, right?
Yeah.
They've already been nerfed the ones.
Yeah,
they went down to 60% chance on death from 100%. I don't remember the numbers.
We'll work something out, but porcupines can be feared, right? Like, part of the theme of 3.7.0 is monsters being scary again. Do you remember when Hellrake used to fuck you up, and Fire Fury and Brutus and every Roa charges and Necromancers? They're all back, right? We have QA members saying the early game is going to wreck new players, and we're excited. So porcupines, dangerous, avoid them.
Yeah, actually, that sort of leads into a question I had earlier. Since you say you want to increase the skill ceiling of Path of Exile, do you also want to then bring up the skill floor to match that? If we're talking about later game Path of Exile, do you want to make it so that it's harder to just mindlessly slam your way through maps?
I mean, philosophically, I think that we could do with raising that a bit, but I'm really not the person who makes those decisions anymore, right? Like, people who actually play the game actively in maps every single league make that decision, and I'm glad that they do.
They make that decision on Reddit, right?
We doubled the amount of life that rares have.
Wait, what?
Rare monsters more life.
We doubled the life bonus on rare monsters.
Oh my!
Wow.
Okay.
Could have mentioned that earlier. Come on.
It's all in the Amazing Balance Manifesto.
I'm looking forward to beasts.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, I saw that. I saw the issue that QA opened today about the beasts being unkillable.
The amount of life regeneration and the rare mods for life regen and the shield one as well, because otherwise there would be monsters that are totally unkillable. But yeah,
I remember back in beta when we had unkillable monsters, and do you remember Beyond? Amazing.
Yes.
That was so cool.
On this topic,
Just about to say.
are you hard at work on that developer's cut?
That would be
Director's
cool.
cut version of Path of Exile. You should package that and sell it as a private league mod set.
I have special projects I work on, and for example, the career launch was my special project over the last few months, so I do need another special project to do.
I'm telling you, people would buy a Chris Wilson version of Path of Exile private league mod pack setup thing, whatever you want to call it.
I did the one where items only drop white and unique, and they don't drop as blue and yellow. Like the no res and no magic one, you have to craft them. That was one that Tencent was saying, Chris, can you make a mod that we can, say Chris designed for our players? And so that was the one that came out of that, which was pretty fun. I like that a lot. Everyone assumes you're going to get more currency drops because you have to use crafting, but there's actually just enough currency that it's quite a lot of fun. Like, you're not swimming in currency after you've crafted it all away, but it's good.
Of all the private leagues I've played, because I've run one every single league now, I did that for 2 months, and that was the most fun. So.
Thanks.
Agreed.
Have there been any, new, you said last time you were on that you may be going to add some new ones. Has there been any more advancement on new mods and stuff?
There hasn't, unfortunately. The melee changes in 3.7.0 were a lot of work, much more than we expected. So we've been heads down just getting that stuff sorted out.
On the whole melee thing, do you predict a diverse melee meta in 3.7? And if so, how have you hoped to achieve this?
So let's talk about diversity in the meta. So when we change everything, no one knows what's going to be good, right? Like if you guys say what skill you think is going to be good, you're not all going to be right or even going to say the same thing, right? So on day one, you're going to get a diverse melee meta because people are going to do crazy stuff, right? That's going to be amazing. We're sitting there, congratulating ourselves. But what typically happens is a few builds get the spotlight, right? Someone says, look at this insanity, and everyone says, I'm going to play that. And so you naturally get people playing the best builds. As diverse as the meta can be, I still expect people to Google the best build guide and to play the best build. So you can have a thing where there's 50 awesome builds, but 5 is slightly better, and those are the 5 that are played. So I don't really care a lot whether it's diverse, as long as there's a lot of options for what people could play, and then we gradually tweak stuff so that the best one of those changes over time. I do expect, though, that there's going to be diversity because there's just been so many buffs, right? There's so much stuff that's there to be found, especially with the way that the game now just plays differently.
Will almost certainly be something OP that we missed.
Yeah, there's going to be some OP stuff. This is why we're doubling the life of rare monsters and so on, right? Like, stuff's powerful now.
And
you've seen the spellcasting buffs and stuff as well in various forms, right? Like, some of the things that Bex has been teasing have been very powerful for non-melee characters too.
I'm maybe going to release that Freeze Pulse after the doorway change. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, we did the doorway change ages ago, like months ago, but we saved it up for spoiler season to give you guys stuff to be excited about. We could have posted it at any time.
So that's also going to work for Scourge Arrow?
Yeah, that was one of the ones Bex
Yeah.
mentioned.
Oh. Yeah, I didn't read
It's
that.
like a list.
Oh, nice.
Spectral Shield Throw, too.
I'll stop. He's been trying to push Spectral Shield Throw for a while. It's not happening, Octavian. So, since we just had it mentioned twice on the document, were there any other notes you had in regards to corpse detonation, both from players and enemies, and like the strength of it?
Let me just check my notes on this one. Corpse. The team say, we have taken steps to make monster on-death effects be more avoidable. There may not be further improvements in 3.7.0, but we are aware of the issue.
Okay. And since we have Jonathan here, he might remember now. What was the Fortify change that Jonathan teased but couldn't remember?
I actually looked this up. I asked the guys. I saw it. So if Jonathan doesn't remember stuff he won't do, I can take him. He's playing Dead Cells anyway. The Fortify change. Okay, so the support gem for Fortify has a higher, more damage multiplier. It can be used on primary skills now. Like it's, like added damage basically. So you can use it on your 6th link. There's more Fortify effect on the passive tree, and the passive skills give more reward for Fortify. So those are the changes.
So not so much the defense of it itself, just the usability of it has been improved.
Yeah.
Some melee characters use it,
Yes. The people in chat seem happy about this.
That's good.
People in the chat like power creep, Chris.
I mean, we've had a lot of defensive stuff taken away recently with the flax.
One of the reasons why we increased the life on rares and also magics, by the way, was because we wanted to actually have the extra power of like single target melee actually have some purpose, by the way. Because the problem that we actually ran into was okay, so kill everything in one hit anyway. We need to actually buff monster life so that there was actually something to feel stronger hitting.
And the spellcasters might also have a more challenging and fun game as a result of this also.
Yeah, right. I don't know why that came. Something you just said for some reason made me think of that. But yeah.
Oh, actually, that reminds me. A long time ago now, Chris, I think you specifically mentioned this. There was an idea about champion mobs. Where did that ever go? Because we never heard about it again.
There was a thing we did in 3.0 when we introduced Part 2, where there were changes to champion mobs in Part 2, right? Am I misremembering? I need to talk to the team about this.
It was something specific about where you guys were like, oh, there's going to be a new type of big mob in the majority of packs. And we kind of got that a little bit
there's
the leveling
the
process.
extra goat man and the extra spooky skeleton, but then we didn't really see it ever again.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe that's the thing that's going to happen more.
It's part of the monster pack system that requires the designers to use it.
Yeah. We've got support for it. We just need to remind people it's there.
It's possible they're using it more current region.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
This was a question from Carve and has been spammed in chat a lot. What happened to Necromantic Aegis? Was it removed or moved?
I know the answer to this.
Oh, that's handy.
It was just moved.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Okay,
By the
Wrathpith
way-
confirmed overpowered. All right.
I think Wrathpith is one of the uniques that was buffed for Legion. By the way, I think it got new
Yes.
properties. Actually, Necromantic Aegis is my favorite keystone. I think it perfectly embodies what a keystone should be. Like, I think it's the best example that I would give if I was talking to a journalist about the game as to what keystones do, in terms of like totally unlocking a new way of playing a character.
Since we
Yeah.
are talking keystones, sorry, Raiz, we saw Wicked Ward being added to the tree. Should we expect any other new keystones being added?
I have no idea.
Oh.
Literally haven't looked.
I don't think so.
Well,
Yeah, Jonathan's skeptical.
ooh. On Necromantic Aegis, people have been making builds that are doing like 9,000% increased damage. So with Wrathpith, so maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Nice. Glad to have you.
Hey, summoner buff confirmed. Okay.
Okay, so a lot of the questions we have in the document now are like future speculative PoE stuff. So if you guys want to go on another incursion rant or anything, I really don't mind. And Nikki, you look like you
I
want to
have-
say something. Go for it.
I have a Legion thing.
Yeah.
So you're introducing the rage bar, which looks really nice for like knowing how much rage you have. Could we expect to see something for how much mitigation you have left on like Molten Shell in the same vein?
It probably won't be in there for 370, but if it's good, then we'll consider it.
I would actually like to do more things like that. Like we do it for Rage because
Yeah.
we have UI capabilities over time. But there's like some things where like it would be better if we moved some information. Say for example, like so the initial implementation of Rage, for example, was just implemented as a buff with a counter, like how like you know like frenzy charges and stuff like that. But it just wasn't really very good. Like it was. And so then after we did the rage bar, we're doing this for more things that we currently use buffs for, like having specific purpose UI for it. So an example would be like things like frenzy charges and stuff like that. It would be better if we have dedicated UI for those kinds
We
of
do
things.
show them on the character.
We do show them on the character, but it's kind of like hard to see the spinning globes on the character. Like
Yeah.
so,
Due to
stuff
that
like-
clever
so-
thing.
so like there are things like this that we probably should do more, like specific UI in some cases, but I don't have any like exact plans here. I just remember voting for the rage bar. Hey, we should probably do this more often. So yeah, I'd like to do that more often.
And what Jonathan likes happens.
Hey.
Actually, just like a fun question since we have both of you here. Individually, what is your biggest pet peeve in Path of Exile currently?
For me right now, it's definitely the item spam.
Yeah, Jonathan's not happy with the item clutter, and I agree with that.
You've surely got something bigger than that, Chris.
I'm not going to say what I thought of. It'll offend people.
Is it the player base? Is your biggest problem with PoE the players?
Yes, you ask what the biggest pet peeve is, and I have this 1,000-yard death stare for a while and don't say anything.
Item drops. Just go with that.
Yeah.
Hang on, I just got a message from Bex. I just need to check it on my phone. I can't check it here. Maybe she's giving me her pet peeve.
Oh,
Ask
build-up.
who their favorite employee is. That was the question from Bex.
So I'm going to call out my a person that has joined our team actually, who I'm very pleased with. We have a developer who was in the Diablo 2 modding community under Fog, and he worked on a bunch of Diablo 2 mods and played a ton of Path of Exile, and we got him on as a designer, like from the community, and he's just been like revamping map bosses and doing all the early game stuff and fixing up Tormented Spirits and redoing Coward's Trial, and it's just a machine of content generation, and it's really good. So if you are a community member who has played a lot of action RPGs and lives in Australia or New Zealand, meaning that, you know, work visas are very easy, and has played thousands of hours of Path of Exile, and is smart and really good at using computers fast, and has programming background, and wants to join our design team, please consider sending me an email. But you have to live in Australia or New Zealand for this one, because it's really easy to hire those people and to try them out and stuff. We don't have time to do long work visa processes for this particular role. So anyway, just something to think about. But thousands of hours of experience and lots of work on mods and stuff. modding community people are great.
Does Jonathan have a favorite employee? Just because Bex will shout at me otherwise.
Mark too.
Yeah.
Mm.
We would be.
Macho is neon.
Yeah, we would be unable to produce the game at the rate we do without it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mark is the unsung hero of Path of
I
Exile.
don't know if he's unsung, but he's
Okay. He's the should still be more sung hero of Path of Exile. If anyone was getting the game director title, that would be him, right? He just makes it happen. He knows everything about the game. His decisions are right, and he's a machine.
Get him a special T-shirt for ExileCon. I think that'd be cool.
Nice. We have special t-shirts. Yeah, and of course Bex needs a mention as well, because she asked the question.
Thank you for the question, Bex. Okay, so it's getting more into like the future of PoE section we have. So I was given this short sentence. Each league adds more mental overhead and more content to progress through, requiring more playtime to get where you were the previous league. Are you happy with this trend for the game?
I think that is what I touched on this before when we were discussing the amount of. Sorry, I'm playing Dead Cells. It's just hard to answer and fight this boss at the same time. But anyway, I touched on this before.
Let's check out how that boss is going.
Take your time. Gaming
I don't think I've
platform,
seen
by
this
the
one
way.
before.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, I was saying I touched on this before when I was talking about how problem that we understand is like the amount of that optional content and wanting to do sort of one thing at a time more rather than having any of that stuff come up at the same time. So I think that whatever system we come up with to address that will hopefully address that concern also. That's kind of basically my answer. See the answer of that other question, I guess.
Okay.
Now I'm just checking out to see if he finishes the boss.
Well, it's hard on this one.
No pressure.
We like adding more leagues to the game. We just want to make sure that it's not causing there to be too much stuff for people to do at any one time, right?
There was a turning point. Like there was like a while there where people were like, "Oh, I love the fact that like when you go to map, you can just sign anything. Like there's all some stuff, and then you get a Zana, and then you go down a hole." Like everyone was positive about it. And then it turned a corner at some point, like a couple of weeks ago, where it was like too much. So I think what we need to do is be back in a way where it feels like we're sort of back to like the point where everyone's sort of happy. Like, there's certainly an amount of random stuff that people like, and we kind of passed that point. So we just need to kind of rein things in again. I don't think it necessarily means like removing things from the game entirely. It just means like changing when you get that stuff.
Jonathan's alluding to some, because in that Q&A when we said we have some ideas we want to talk about in a few weeks regarding this stuff, we had some ideas, we just haven't locked them in yet, so we will do hopefully in the near future, and that's what Jonathan's alluding to there. Just some changes to how this stuff works.
Okay. You kind of answered the next question, so I guess the next thing would be, and it's a bit inflammatory, but what would you say towards the players who view this trend as being an attempt to forcibly increase player retention? In a game that's meant to be played forever, is this even avoidable?
The thing that increases player retention and makes people play forever is the game being good. We can't force it by tricking people or having too many systems, right? Like if there's too many systems, the game is bad and they play less. So, yeah, I mean, look, I talk about words like retention when I'm doing GDC talks and stuff because that's what people in the industry understand. But at the end of the day, we don't have retention graphs, and like I have to read Reddit to find out how good our Steam numbers are. It's we're not very data driven. We mostly go on gut feeling. What?
Right.
You're right there, Raiz. You need a moment.
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
So in the past when you've said like you'd like to have, I think you said no more than 10 leagues in the game, you want to like trim that down, and Jonathan says that maybe we're past that point now. Where do you kind of feel like we're at with current PoE to where you would like it to be? Or...
The trick is having it so you can access the league content if you want to, locked away in an appropriate place, right? Like if there's 10 or 15 leagues actively in your face saying to you, you've got some sulfite, now go use it. Now it's time to go into synthesis and do all these things. That's a problem. But if you have the ability to go play in Harbinger Land for a while because it's something that you know how to unlock and get access to, that's pretty cool. And so we want there to be a lot of leagues. We want the content to all be used. Like, it costs us a ton of money to make it, right? Like, it's millions of dollars to make these leagues. And we don't want that to be thrown away. Like, us not using synthesis at the moment is criminal. But we don't want to just layer it on there. We need to find smart ways to have the content available so people can choose, I like this, I'm going to go and play in that. And that doesn't mean unlimited sulfite. Please stop asking for that.
I'm just curious on, like, your idea of it, and it's something that I've mentioned a few times in other games of similar systems, where it's kind of like you can choose, say with masters, for example, like you favor one master, so you got maybe like 5% more spawns with one, 5% less with the other. That way, it's not a case of you have infinite delve, but you have, even if it's just the teeniest, like 1% more delve, so the player feels like they've made an impactful choice themselves. From a dev point of view, what's the super obvious flaw with that I'm just completely missing?
Well, we're not going to tell you what the system we've designed is.
Yeah,
right?
we
haven't decided to. So, like, there's really not a lot more.
We have some thoughts about this stuff that tie in closely to what you're saying that we will talk about in the coming weeks once we get a moment to, once Legion's out and the immediate problems are fixed, then we'll work this out, and then we'll talk to you guys about it, and then we'll do it in 3.8.0. And look, we're fine to communicate that stuff. So here's the thing. The nature of a league is secret until announcement, right? But we're happy to talk about the scope of the other things, right? Like, you knew a melee rework was coming, and it's okay to know that there's some old league reworks coming, and we can talk about them. It's just an important thing to keep the league itself a secret, so it's exciting to do a big announcement of it.
That's fine. In that case, then, again, I'm just going to completely open the floor to everyone for a bit, and I'm kind of happy.
Is there a reason for the caps that we have, like sulfide caps or the amount of memories we can have? Do you feel like you've hit the right spot there, or could there be more leeway for players to like hoard a little bit more?
A lot of people often ask for significantly more hoarding so they can just play maps for like an entire week and then play Delve for like 4 days in a row. And that's, while the league was active, that was not something we particularly wanted to promote. We've been a bit more generous with the caps since then. Delve needs some serious just rebalancing at the moment. Like, the whole experience of doing the catch-up mechanic and playing Delve in a new league is kind of broken right now. I actually am responsible for that directly. It's quite embarrassing. So I'll have to fix that. But yeah, there's some rebalancing we can do there, and we'll probably see more generous caps over time, right? Like, we don't like, for optional content like this, we don't want to control it as carefully as we did when it was an actual active league. For the synthesis memory piece cap, that was certainly intentional because we wanted to make sure people were engaging with the current league mechanic. The synthesis memory board had various other problems. It means it's probably not coming back in exactly that form, so it's pointless for us to debate whether or not the cap would be higher or the same if it were coming back in that form.
One question that I've had spammed at me all day so far in chat is there any chance we could maybe see an increase of the current ladder caps and like ladder limits, since the player base has ballooned so much over the years?
Do you mean the number of people who are displayed on the ladder on the website?
Yeah.
I'll bring it up with the guys. I mean, we have all sorts of fun tech limits behind the scenes that cause problems. Like,
Probably.
Yeah, Jonathan feels optimistic, so that's good. There are these. Okay, let's talk briefly about guild limits and friends limits, right?
Ooh.
So we have them set at certain points. This isn't positive. Don't get your hopes up. We have them set at certain points, and the scary thing with this kind of stuff is we get asked frequently to increase these. Right? Everyone wants more friends. Everyone wants more larger guilds. The problem is, we only find out that it wrecks everything at the point that it's too late. Like, let's say you got 100 friends, so we say, let's make it 150. So we have a launch, and then everything breaks. And then what do? You cull everyone's friends and remove the last 50? It's very hard to know where our bottlenecks are in an infrastructure point of view without actually running into them, because everything's fine.
The current number of friends you can have is actually responsible for the current upper bound on the possible size of a Path of Exile realm. Like, it actually used to be, we actually used to be able to get more players on just benchmarking and using bots, because we never actually reached the limit. But, or at least we only reached it time. Like,
at Betrayal launch.
It was a Betrayal launch, and then I increased it since then. But the we actually used to be able to get more people on back when people were able to have smaller friends lists, because we increased it. I think we changed it so like, we made it so we went from 100 to 200, right?
I can't remember.
Well, like maybe you made it so you could buy extra slots or something.
You can buy gold slots.
No, I think it was. Isn't there friend slots?
No, we don't sell those.
No, we don't sell those. Okay, well, whatever. There was something around here. We changed that, and like, we used to actually. I remember at one point I benchmarked the realm up to 400,000 concurrents, which was like a ludicrously high number. And then like years later, I came back and we redid that test, and then we found we could only get up to the limit we actually hit on.
Close to 200.
On the trail. It was like getting up to 200, and it's higher again now because I like work more to like things, but like this kind of stuff, like it actually does like affect the scalability of the game, so you have to be a little bit careful about it.
Speaking of realms, we had a Korean launch a few days ago, and it went really well. Did you know players on Path of Exile are Korean? Yeah, more than half. I mean, it's partly because
You're cutting out.
Wait, what?
More than half are Korean?
the reason why is because right now it's late in the league. There aren't many normal players playing, right? The numbers are low. Look on Steam, right? But we just had the Korean like pre-open period where everyone's excitedly playing, and so way more than half the players are Korean on Path of Exile, which is fascinating. I mean, of course, more people will come when the new league starts, but we'll also get our normal player numbers back up. So we're expecting like 15 or 20% or maybe 25% of the realm to be Korean. But this will be a thing, right? Like there'll be a lot of Korean people to trade with. It's really awesome. They're taking the game very seriously. It's going to be very exciting because they're part of our main realm rather than segregated off on their own servers like China and Taiwan were. That just means more items entering the economy, more players. It's going to be awesome. And they will win. They will win the races, guys. Just give it a few months.
Okay.
Yeah, people are chatting about Korean races. It's amazing.
One thing, and we're kind of going back because this is less of a technical question. So a few leagues ago, I can't remember when exactly, we saw the block rework where you changed the way that like block and spell block was dished out, and a lot of people saw this as a nerf. Are you guys like happy with how that change went about, or?
Both Jonathan and I will be quiet for a while.
Yeah,
There.
I don't know.
There's block stuff I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about because I'm not sure it's been in. Well, did we change block stuff in 3.7? Didn't we?
Are you referring to what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I already told you.
Okay, right.
Hang on, I can confirm. Bex just sent me a message. It's fine. You can tell us what it says. 100%. You don't need to check. She said it's fine. You can spoil it. It's fine.
She would use the right code words if she was confirming that, and you did not use the code words.
Hang on. She used 2 words. Amazon Prime. Are those?
No, that's last week's code.
Oh damn. I tried. Shit.
You were close.
I maybe got that.
What? We're having a moment of silence? What's going on, Tarke?
I mean, this is like in TwitchCon when I had all my really bad jokes and it would sit for 10 minutes where I was like, shh, don't say anything. Just let him brew in it. And it's like...
Don't encourage him.
We were mourning the death of Synthesis. It ends on Tuesday. We should mute the realm for a minute.
Moment of silence.
Because we want trade to be harder, right? So.
You'd have a large number of toucans waiting for you in chat.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's actually a question. So since we're expecting a massive influx of players, how do you guys feel about the state of like softcore trade as the player base keeps like booming each league and stuff?
Oh, these are questions. Yeah, look, trade's a big complicated topic. We covered in the manifesto. There are rough edges that we need to improve there. I hear it's a little better in hardcore.
Depends. Define better.
Yeah.
When you get trades,
It's pretty rough, you know. It gets pretty tough finding people to trade with.
We are sympathetic to this and have discussed many plans internally that have all failed, right? Like we sat down and we said, okay, guys, what would it be like to add a map marketplace, right? We even called like the Zana Zone, the cartography corner, right? Like we came up with names for this, right? The way to trade maps. And we tried. We wanted to have an announcement where we go, look, guys, we made a trade thing for you. And it didn't work, right? Like it's outside the scope of this conversation to go into all the details, and maybe it's a good post for some time, but we are trying, but we're super careful about this. As far as we're concerned, if we accidentally make trade too easy, the game is over fast, right? And we can't take that risk. So we want to
ever take that back either, can you?
Yeah. I mean, look, we kind of got conned into trade being like how it is at the moment, right? Like there's a string of events here that led to fast trade. And I understand there's problems with it, right? Like me calling it fast seems like I'm, not seeing how it actually is. But right now, realistically, when the league starts, you can skip forward to your end game gear within a few days, right? People are finishing their builds fast, so that's not great for the game. And so we're petrified by that. And you guys are saying, but it takes hours to skip months of content, guys.
I'm just curious, what do you think is like the main things which conned trade, or like what were the main like changing points?
So initially, you had to go and actually find the items on the forums and read the forum threads and that kind of stuff, right? So some smart person decided, you know what we can do? We can scrape the forums and have it be searchable, because why not, right? So our item linking idea, having items linked on the forums, was the key thing that went wrong there. It's a brilliant idea, except that it caused it so there's databases of items, right? So now everyone's having to use acquisition and procurement and so on to post items on the forums. So we said, well, look, that's a real pain. It involves like typing in account details into third-party programs. This is a mess. Why don't we just have it that the premium stash tabs automatically put it in an index? Because that way there's proper item details, it's all maintained, it can be nice and fast. There's all these advantages, and we might sell some more premium stash tabs. The problem is, because we now made that a paid feature, we can't turn it off. People have paid for that. I don't want to refund $10 million of premium tabs because we turn that feature off, right? It's not gonna happen. And so now we're stuck like this, that now there's an indexable database of items that's just going to be available for people to instantly find what they want.
Would a more GGG accurate, a more ideal from your perspective version of trade look something closer to like what we have on console, where you've had a more controlled environment to implement a vision of trade?
The plan with the console trade, the trade market as it's called there, is the concept of like going through a garage sale where there's treasures hidden among a pile of junk, right? Like you want to find rare rings. You search up rare rings, and there's tons of them. You flick through them and find one that's good. And it's meant to be hard to find, but fast to actually do. So with PoE.trade and pathofexile.com/trade, it's very fast to find an item, and then it's a pain to actually go and get the guy to be online and selling it to you. And for the console version, it's a real pain to find the item you want, and then you just make an offer and get it real fast because there's a proper like cross-instance kind of, very fast asynchronous trade thing there. We don't want to combine the two. We do not want it so that you pick an item, like you search for the thing, it's there, you click the button, you've got it, right? Now, it's funny because when people ask for an auction house, I personally would not be opposed to actually having 24-hour, 48-hour auctions on items, right? That's a cool sword. I'm going to bid a bunch of exalts on it. Oh no, someone's outbid me. That's a fun experience. And it taking 48 hours to get the item means that you can still do upgrades to your character and you can look forward to them, but it's not a thing where you just quickly transcend to the best character. Though I understand this is terrible for currency trades and map trades and that kind of stuff. And people aren't asking for actual auctions. They're wanting a buyout house,
I mean, that's what it used to be, and people naturally transitioned to the options that you guys seem to dislike now, so.
And even, like, I buy a lot of Magic the Gathering cards today, and most people use buyouts, right? The actual concept of having an auction where for a week you outbid people and there's strategy to it and cool stuff like that, that's rare. It's a lot of fun, but most people just put a price on it and say, I'm a shop, buy my thing. Because that's how online shopping is these days. There's a price, and to some extent, we're finding that in Path of Exile.
On the theme of easy to answer questions, with all the like legislation that's being pushed with the loot boxes at the moment, I'm just curious how you guys feel about loot boxes in PoE at the moment.
From a legal point of view, we're compliant and we're not worried about changes in legislation, but behind the scenes, we are looking at other monetization alternatives. Like, okay, let's be honest here, right? Let's talk about battle passes for a second, because this is a fun one. So we've looked into making a battle pass system for Path of Exile, like Fortnite and stuff, right? And the problem is, we have a challenge system already that already gives out free rewards at certain points, right? So let's talk about what would a battle pass look like, right? So the way they work in these other games is you buy it, and it gives you a bunch of challenges, and then you complete the challenges and get stuff, but you can also pay to complete the challenges, right? So there's many problems here. Number one, if we don't give you the current 40 challenges for free, then we've taken away something in order to sell it to you. So that's not happening. Number two, if we don't give you the current challenge rewards you're getting for free, then we've taken away something, which is bad. Number 3, we already have supporter packs to buy per league. And if we take the things out of the supporter packs and make you have to complete challenges to get them, we've made it worse for you, which is bad. Number 4, we don't have enough micro creation capacity to make a battle pass and also have the mystery box at the same time. So we have to turn off the mystery box and do a battle pass, which might be bad. And the list of bad goes on and on and on. And so we haven't been able to actually make this a system because we don't want to hurt our current users. Like, we don't want to take away the concept of there being 40 challenges and cool rewards. And the monolith rewards, the monolith set as it's called, from Legion are really, really awesome. You'll love the challenge rewards. I don't know if they've been shown yet. I'm pretty sure they haven't, but yeah, they'll be really cool. Bex will be showing them in a few days. So because of all of this, it's really hard to do a battle pass thing, but we're trying to do this behind the scenes. We're trying to find a way for it to work so that we can replace mystery boxes at the point that legislation requires it. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen either. But
The battle pass isn't going to happen because we couldn't hear
I
Jonathan.
don't think that the legislation's going to.
yeah, the legislation won't affect the Exile mystery boxes because we're not targeting children. We don't have pay-to-win elements in there. There's the odds are disclosed. Like, it's the items.
They're not tradable.
Yeah, they're not tradable. The items become on sale in the general store later. Like, there's a lot of things that we're doing that aren't bad like some games. The only thing we're doing that's bad is the duplicates thing, and that enables them to be super cheap. And people are aware of it, and it's very publicly disclosed. And we are looking at alternatives of stuff you can do with your duplicate micros over time.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty happy, to be honest. I don't know if you guys got some thinky faces, but I'm pretty fulfilled. I don't know.
I have a quick one. Something we haven't heard in a long time. Someone just mentioned in chat. Are there any secret recipes still to uncover?
If there aren't, we'll have to add some. I came up with some cool secret stuff, and the team shot me down, so I'm sad about that. But we'll get some more stuff.
Whoa. Well, I need a WoW Classic key, so I'm gonna have to mention this. You did talk about Diablo 3 and like items specifically dropping for the certain character type. And I was just wondering, because a lot of players very frequently come to me and they ask, how do you price items? How do you get an idea? And the feedback that I usually give them is just play a certain character and then you learn how these items are priced for that specific character or that specific type. So maybe somebody's playing something with like weapon elemental damage or elemental damage with attacks. And then they kind of move on to the next one. Have you guys looked into maybe methods of players getting like a better idea of how much their items are worth just for the hype factor? Because very frequently people will even vendor an item that could potentially earn them a lot, and then they go on Reddit and complain how they never find anything.
To some extent, skill and pricing is as important as skill playing the game. And I know it sounds terrible, and I don't want players to take advantage of each other, but if we hold the hand too much, then people lose the ability to actually learn how to price stuff properly. Like, whatever system we come up with that helps you with your pricing isn't going to be foolproof. Path of Exile has insane, weird items that you need, right? Like, for some reason, +3 to some type of skill is suddenly relevant, or various other bits and pieces. It isn't as simple as some games where it's a matter of going, there are 8 attributes and my class needs these 3 and I want the numbers to be big. So we aren't helping people with item pricing, partly because seeing good deals and taking advantage of them is a skill that's important, right? Like, it's fun to flip things. I mean, I know like currency flipping and stuff is seen as negative, but it is fun to say, huh, this is item priced really well. I'm going to get it and I'm going to resell it and make a profit. That's an end game play style that some people play. And these weird things like being a good labyrinth farmer or being a good trader are supported play styles that we think are very important, in addition to being good at clicking on monsters fast.
I think something that Raiz said towards the end of that question, though, sort of ties into part of the community reaction to synthesis as a whole, though, which is that it can often be very difficult to get excited about a drop that's so obscure as a drop can be in Path of Exile. I don't know. It's a hard thing to fight while still having those niche items that are super valuable, but I think it is part of the reason why like nobody got excited over fractured items, or only people who took the time to go and read through a database did. Yeah,
I understand. And we care about the main drop pool in Path of Exile being exciting. Like, a thing I'm often talking to the team about is what can we do to make it so that when you kill a regular monster, items drop that are immediately exciting to you. And this is like a few leagues ago, we put time-worn relics back in, like, the second time we were using them. And that was a bit of a mistake because it caused way too many powerful items to get into the economy via that method too early. Like, they were just too common. But the concept of having things that are in the main drop pool you can be excited about, so killing monsters is a rewarding experience, and you know that you found something cool immediately without having to read the mods between the lines and work out what some niche build uses. I really want to work on that. And so that's why more chase uniques like Skyforth and stuff should be made over time and should be put in the main pool. And every time we hide stuff behind a League reward, like there's a bunch of cool stuff you find in Legion, but that's not in the main drop pool, right? You can't kill a regular white monster and get a Legion jewel, but you should be able to get new stuff in each league that's exciting, and that's certainly something we'll see more of in the future.
Is that part of the thrust behind designing incubators, as having that sort of ticking time bomb of eventually the white mob is going to drop something cool? And it's not actually the white mob dropping it, but it's the 10,000th white mob that you kill.
Sure, it certainly helps. It certainly helps. But the incubators themselves only come from flagged monsters and legions, so...
Yeah, I guess.
Having said that, you can get Horizon Orbs now from regular monsters, so that's cool.
Oh.
Yeah, that's very nice. Well, on that note, though, I would like to thank both Chris and Jonathan for giving us your time, and I'd just like to finish on a question which you might maybe answer. So last patch was spells, this patch was melee. What's next?
We actually don't know yet, and that's part of the beauty of the... If you watch my GDC talk, you'll see how we really don't plan too far ahead with the stuff. Like, obviously, we know what's coming in 4.0, but we don't know what's going to happen in 3.8 yet. We don't know what the league is. There has not been a discussion where we've sat down and said, what league are we doing, right? We had some cool ideas a few months ago. They're probably all... Like, I'm pretty sure we took the rewards from those and put them... And we don't know what we're fixing next. So have a think about it, right? Make an angry Reddit thread about the thing you think should get attention next. Jonathan's talked about item clutter. We've talked about improving past league integrations in the game so that Betrayal and Delve are better. That's stuff that we can look at. But if you have any other thoughts, it's always important to let us know. Having said that, we also like the idea of doing smaller scoped expansions so we can actually get work done on 4.0, right? Like 4.0 is subtly getting shifted into the future as we're busy doing these leagues, right? I think we made no real progress on it during Synthesis because we were just so busy on Synthesis. We've made some good progress while we've been working on Legion. Like 4.0 has come a long way, and that's awesome. But we do actually want to get this out at some stage. And just because other game companies are slow at announcing their games, and meaning given we have a lot of time to make 4.0, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to finish it quickly.
The chat can see it, but while Chris is firing shots, from our perspective, it's just a foot in the background, and I can't get over it. Nice.
Okay.
Nice, you can't see it. Yeah, Jonathan actually broke his...
Oh, he broke his foot, did you say?
Yeah, yesterday he broke his toe.
Oh, what did he do?
I think he walked into something, but he kicked a door jam. It's terrible. But this means that, like, earlier when I said, hey, I need an extension cord for my laptop, he had to go and get his crutches and, like, walk around and find me an extension cord. Poor guy.
Oh. Well, I hope Jonathan has a quick recovery and, I guess, get some sleep, and I'll see you guys, post 3.7.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, guys. It's been awesome being on here, and I hope you guys really enjoy it. It's going to be a good one, so let us know what you think.
Will do.
Thank you very much for coming on, and I'll catch you later.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Okay, so that stopped recording. I'll drop the call so you can get with your business, but thank you very much for that. And actually, if you just want to leave the call, and then I can chat with the others. Or I can drop... What? It's just, if I drop the call, you'll keep chatting and I'll feel bad. So you can leave whenever you want to leave.
How bad
basically.
can you make this, Tarke?
Look,
Jesus
right,
Christ.
the thing is, right...
Outros are hard,
Outros
right?
are really difficult. Outros
You
are
can hang
hard.
around for as long as you want.
I never thought you could mess it up more than
See you,
last
Chris.
See you later.
He actually left, dude.
Oh,
What the fuck, Tarke? He said no and left, dude. Holy shit.
No,
Mark,
you hang up.
savage.
No, you hang up. No, you hang up.
No, that wasn't a you hang up. No, you hang up. It was you hang up. Okay, and then he left, dude.
I feel
That's what you did.
I feel bad.